Chapter 1328. Zhu Liang. At the heart of the 9 peaks, the 5 figures who were originally seated on the tall platform in the middle opened their eyes one after another. When they saw Zhuowen, who was holding hands with Mu Chunxue, their eyes immediately revealed a surprised expression. Mu Chunxue was considered an influential figure at the heart of the 9 peaks. She had defeated the 5 of them the moment she entered and became a core disciple of Sky Capital Peak. Recently, she had even been accepted as a direct disciple by Old Man Tianju. It could be said that Mu Chunxue had been in the limelight recently. There were only a handful of people in the inner academy who did not recognize Mu Chunxue. Who is this person? On the platform, a young man with a dark and cold expression slowly stood up. His eyes were cold as he stared at Zhuowen and asked in a deep voice, "I remember this person. He seems to be the leader of the group who snatched the territory of Dao Hen's group. Zhu Liang, do you want to give it a try? Although I know that you like Mu Chunxue, she is now a direct disciple of Sky Capital Peak. She is not someone you are worthy of." On the other side of the platform, a lady with short hair and a dry face laughed delicately. She stared at the young man with a mocking expression. "Niu, this has nothing to do with you. I will definitely become a core disciple. It is only a matter of time. Even if I am not worthy of Mu Chunxue, is that fellow who just entered the inner academy worthy of her? That fellow's aura is only at the 2nd level of the Emperor realm. He actually dares to hold Mu Chunxue's hand. He is simply ignorant and fearless." Zhu Liang snorted coldly. He took a step forward and rushed towards Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue. Niu's beautiful eyes flickered. She looked past Zhu Liang's back and landed on Zhuowen, who was holding Mu Chunxue's right hand. Niu's thoughts were much more meticulous than Zhu Liang's, and she naturally noticed the bashful expression on Mu Chunxue's face. It was obvious that Mu Chunxue did not resist Zhuowen's tugging. This scene caused Niu's eyebrows to furrow slightly. She naturally knew Mu Chunxue's style of doing things very well. She was an extremely cold and arrogant woman. Her entire body exuded a cold aura. It was very difficult for ordinary people to get close to her. Even though there was no lack of suitors in the inner court because of Mu Chunxue's beauty and bearing, most of these suitors didn't dare approach her. Because if they dared to approach Mu Chunxue, then most of them would have their tendons and bones torn apart, and their fates were rather miserable. Who is this guy? Why does Mu Chunxue seem to treat him so differently? Niu's eyes quickly landed on Zhuowen. However, when she looked at him, she realized that his cultivation level and aura weren't strong. He was only a 2nd-level martial emperor. This level of cultivation was not even comparable to Zhu Liang. Could it be that Mu Chunxue liked this kind of guy? Swoosh. When Zhuowen pulled Mu Chunxue and was about to reach the White Jade Pavilion, the sound of something breaking through the air suddenly swept past them. Immediately after, an extremely loud and piercing sound rang in Zhuowen's ears. Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. His right foot moved, his waist twisted, and his right palm formed a fist. He suddenly punched out, bringing with him a terrifying gale that whistled behind him. At this moment, Zhu Liang was just a few meters behind Zhuowen. He didn't expect Zhuowen's reaction to be so fast. He didn't even look behind him and directly attacked. However, he wasn't afraid. With a cold snort, he also punched out. Soon after, the 2 fists collided, and a dull sound of thunder erupted. Crack! A clear bone cracking sound resounded. Immediately, the pupils of Zhu Liang, who was originally attacking from behind, shrunk to the extreme. He only felt an extremely intense pain being transmitted from his right hand. The bone cracking sound from earlier had been transmitted from his right arm. Why does this guy have such a terrifying strength? Zhu Liang's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He took a step in the air and hurriedly retreated. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes were extremely cold. Although he didn't know this Zhu Liang, he had seen him before. He was one of the 5 strongest people at the bottom of the 9 peaks. Previously, he had been training on the central platform at the bottom of the 9 peaks. Zhuowen didn't have any interaction with this guy before. Now that Zhu Liang attacked him for no reason, even if Zhuowen's temper was good, he still felt a little angry in his heart. When Zhu Liang was about to retreat, Zhuowen's right hand clasped Zhu Liang's other hand. After which, Zhu Liang suddenly stopped retreating and was violently thrown to the ground by Zhuowen. Rumble. A dull thud rang out and dust filled the air. Zhu Liang crashed to the ground with his head facing upwards. Traces of cracks appeared on the ground where his back touched, densely packed like a spider web. Zhu Liang spat out a mouthful of blood and his eyes were filled with shock and anger. Judging from this guy's aura, he was only at the second level of the martial emperor realm. How could his strength be so terrifying? He couldn't even withstand a single blow from this guy. Now, he was thrown to the ground like a little chick. Cough cough cough. Zhu Liang coughed. Just as he was about to get up, a foot suddenly stepped on his chest. He saw Zhuowen looking down at him coldly and said indifferently, "Did I offend you before? Why did you attack me behind my back?" At this moment, the surroundings became quiet. The exchange between Zhuowen and Zhu Liang was too fast. Just a moment ago, Zhu Liang was still behind Zhuowen. In the next moment, Zhu Liang was ruthlessly stepped on by Zhuowen. The process was a little too fast. Zhu Liang has been taken care of so easily. Niu, who had been paying attention to the scene, trembled. Her beautiful eyes widened as she looked at the scene in disbelief. Zhu Liang was one of the top 5 official disciples. Yet, he had been taken care of so easily. This showed how terrifying the young man who was with Mu Chunxue was. Zhu Liang. Mu Chunxue, who was standing beside Zhuowen, frowned slightly. She stared at the young man under Zhuowen's feet and said in a cold voice, "Chen Shui, you know him?" Zhuowen asked in surprise. Mu Chunxue nodded and said, "When I first entered the inner courtyard's 9 peaks, he had pestered me before. However, I ignored him." Hearing those words, Zhuowen came to know that Zhu Liang was once one of Mu Chunxue's pursuers. When he saw that Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue were walking together, he directly attacked Zhuowen. "Who are you?" Zhu Liang was tough. He endured the pain and stared at Zhuowen. Zhuowen did not bother to pay attention to him. He pulled Mu Chunxue and entered the white jade loft. "He's so strong. When this man defeated Dao Hen, I thought he was at most a second heaven emperor. Now, even Zhu Liang has been defeated by him. This man is unfathomable. I'm afraid he's more than qualified to become a core disciple of the 9 peaks." Many warriors in the surroundings were discussing animatedly. They looked at Zhuowen's figure with fear as he entered the white jade loft. Zhu Liang struggled to get up. His face turned green and red. In the end, he left the place dejectedly. The white jade loft was quite large. There were more than 10 rooms inside. There was an open-air courtyard in the middle of the loft. There were white jade tables and stone benches in the courtyard. There were all kinds of green plants around. The environment was very elegant. At this moment, there was a group of people sitting in the courtyard. They were Moyan Wushang, Qing Yin, Jianan, Gatha, and Mo Lingtian. Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue's arrival naturally attracted the 5 people's attention. "Brother Zhuo, you're finally back." Jianan smiled heartlessly. He took a step forward and came in front of Zhuowen. Looking at Jianan, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a strange look. He realized that Jianan's aura had become much stronger. There were also traces of Emperor's might. He had broken through to the Emperor realm. "Jianan, you've broken through?" Zhuowen asked. Jianan grinned when he heard Zhuowen's question. His eyes were filled with pride. He said, "Hehe, Brother Zhuo, you're really sharp. You saw it with a single glance. You purposely released your aura. Who couldn't tell?" Jiosho slowly walked over and curled her lips. Hearing that, Jianan scratched his head and gave a simple and honest smile. "Brother Ling Tian has also broken through to the Emperor realm. He broke through when you left the inner court for the Great Desolate Forest," Jianan said with a smile. Zhuowen nodded. Jianan and Mo Lingtian were both peak heavenly venerables. In addition, they had absorbed the energy of the Heart of Emperor. It was only a matter of time before they broke through. Zhuowen was not too surprised by their breakthroughs. Gatha looked at Mu Chunxue, who was beside Zhuowen. She asked in surprise, "Brother Zhuo, this is?" This was because she discovered that Zhuowen was holding the girl's hand. Their actions were rather intimate. Moreover, when Gatha's attention fell on Mu Chunshue's face, a trace of absent-mindedness appeared in her eyes. The girl in front of her was extremely beautiful. She was like a fairy. Whether it was her temperament or appearance, it was the first time Gatha had seen someone like her. Although she was also a girl, she was stunned and felt a little ashamed. Sister Chen Shui. Suddenly, Moyan Wushang appeared in front of Jianan and Gatha. His beautiful eyes stared at Mu Chunshue, who was beside Zhuoan. His face was filled with excitement. Jianan and Gatha quietly took a step back. They looked at each other and suddenly understood. Zhuoan had gone to the great desolate forest for the girl called Mu Chunshue. As Jianan and Gatha had entered the outer court with Zhuoan, they had not seen Mu Chunshue before. They had only heard from Moyan Wushang that Mu Chunshue was Zhuoan's lover. The main reason why Zhuoan wanted to enter the inner court was because of Mu Chunshue. Hee. So it's sister-in-law. You're really beautiful. Brother Zhuo has good taste. Jianan's thoughts were pure. She spoke directly. At this moment, she did not hide her words. Hearing this, Mu Chunshue, who was nestled beside Zhuoan, blushed like a ripe red apple. Although she knew about her relationship with Zhuoan, Moyan Wushang and some of Zhuoan's friends definitely knew. However, now that Jianan had called her sister-in-law, she could not help but feel a little shy. Chen Shui, you're really amazing. You've entered the inner court for less than a year and you've become a direct disciple of Sky Capital Peak. Qingyan also came to Moyan Wushang's side and smiled at Mu Chunshue. Qingyan, long time no see. I was just lucky to become a direct disciple. Mu Chunshue said with a gentle smile. Let's sit down and talk. Chen Shui, you haven't seen Wushang and Qingyan for a long time. Let's catch up. Zhuowen was all smiles. Soon after, he pulled Mu Chen Shui to sit on the stone bench, while the others also took their seats. For a time, everyone began to chat in high spirits. There were no personal grudges or benefits mixed in. It was just a conversation between friends. Chapter 1329. Detoxification. Big Brother Zhuo, have you become a direct disciple of the mysterious origin peak? Jianan suddenly asked in surprise. During their conversation earlier, Zhuowen had briefly mentioned this matter, and Jianan had immediately asked about it. Zhuowen nodded and briefly explained the process. Jianan and the others knew that Zhuowen had obtained the inheritance in the Emperor's tomb, but what they didn't know was that Zhuowen had obtained a sacred weapon in there. It's a pity that the Emperor's sword can only be used twice. Mo Lingtian said with some regret. Zhuowen shook his head and said with a smile, there's nothing to be regretful about. The path of martial arts requires one to rely on oneself. If one keeps relying on external things, it won't be good for one's development. Zhuowen's words were correct. On the arduous path of martial arts, one could only rely on oneself. If one relied too much on external items, it would be too restrictive on one's body. Zhuowen's words were correct. On the arduous path of martial arts, one could only rely on oneself. Oh, that's right. How is the cold poison in elder sister Chen Shui's body? Moyan Wushang suddenly looked at Mu Chunshue and asked. Mu Chen Shui was stunned. When she was about to speak, Zhuowen cut in. The cold poison in Chen Shui's body has been suppressed for now, but to expel it, I'm afraid it will take some time. Wushang, arrange a room for me and Chen Shui. I need to expel the cold poison from her body. Hearing this, Moyan Wushang nodded slightly. Soon after, he purposely chose a rather large room. Zhuowen brought Mu Chunshue into the room. In the slightly dark room, Zhuowen and Mu Chunshue sat opposite each other on the bed. Zhuowen's right hand was holding the latter's jade-like hand. His consciousness entered her body and he found that although the cold poison in Mu Chunshue's body was temporarily suppressed, the cold energy that spread through her meridians was like maggots attached to the inside of her meridians. He was very clear that if the cold energy in her meridians was not expelled, it would be very dangerous for Mu Chunshue's future cultivation. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's right hand touched his forehead and directly summoned Xiao Hei. Zhuowen, this is... Seeing Xiao Hei appear in front of her, Mu Chunshue's beautiful eyes were filled with surprise. She couldn't help but ask. This is my dragon soul. Last time when my armor soul materialized, you should have seen its body. Zhuowen said with a smile. He. This dragon lord is the Great Abyss Holy Dragon. Back in the day, I was a famous figure in the Central Plains. Little girl, if it weren't for the fact that you're Zhuowen's lover, I wouldn't have bothered to appear. Xiao Hei crossed its paws and said in a slightly arrogant manner. Zhuowen held his forehead with his right hand. He realized that every time he let Xiao Hei out, it was embarrassing him, so he didn't hold back and slapped it. Damn it, Xiao Wenzi, you actually dare to hit me? Have you forgotten that every night when no one was with you, it was me who was with you? Is this how you treat me? See if I don't bite you to death. Following that, Xiao Hei's cursing voice could be heard. There was also a slight sound of biting. Mu Chunxue looked at the man and dog fighting, and black lines appeared on her forehead. However, she was quite surprised and curious that Zhuowen's dragon soul could speak. Clearly, this black dragon's origins were extraordinary. The Great Abyss Holy Dragon? Where have I heard of it before? Mu Chunxue muttered in a low voice. Oh, little dragon, that's not right. How can you bite your master? Even a dog should act like a dog. You can't act so recklessly. Otherwise, Zhuowen will stew you someday. A mocking voice sounded. Immediately, a jade cauldron flew out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows. On top of the jade cauldron was a strange beast that looked like a fox. It stood on its hind legs like a human and crossed its front paws in front of its chest. It was gloating as it watched the man and dog fight. Brat. Let's stop fighting. I want to beat up this guy Cheng Huang first. After saying that, Xiao Hei left Zhuowen and pounced towards Cheng Huang, who was standing on the turtle's back. Soon after, the sound of a fox and a dog's barking mixed together and became extremely intense. At this moment, Mo Yang Wu Shong and the others in the courtyard looked at each other. Naturally, they also heard the huge commotion in the room. Does Big Brother Zhuo need to make such a big commotion to expel the cold poison? Jianan scratched his head and chuckled. Of course, Jianan's current smile wasn't simple and honest at all. Instead, it was a little treacherous. Mo Lingtian rubbed his chin and said seriously, expelling the poison is secondary. The two of them are doing what they should be doing. We can't disturb them. Big Brother Ling Tian is right. We definitely can't disturb them. We'll just keep watch outside and prevent others from disturbing Big Brother Zhuo and sister-in-law. Hee. Jianan revealed a you-know-what-I-mean expression and chuckled. Jia Shou, who was standing at the side, looked at Mo Lingtian and Jianan, these two fellows. One was asking and the other was answering. They were saying things that she could not understand at all. She could not help but pout. What are the two of you talking about? I clearly heard a dog barking and a fox barking inside. It seems like there's a dog and a fox in there. Jianan and Mo Lingtian looked at each other. They really did hear the dog and fox barking. Jianan swallowed his saliva and said, Don't tell me Big Brother Zhuo and sister-in-law have some other weird fetish. They like to imitate the sounds of dogs and foxes. That's possible. Moreover, it's a very good imitation. I give you 100 points. This kind of trick is very good. I'm impressed. Mo Lingtian rubbed his chin again and smiled slyly. Inside the room, Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue didn't know that Jianan and Mo Lingtian were making wild guesses outside. The two of them were speechless as they looked at Xiao Hei and the little fox who were entangled together. Zhuowen tidied up his slightly messy clothes. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he controlled the Fushi cauldron and separated Xiao Hei and Cheng Huang. That's enough, you two. I didn't ask you to come out to fight. Come and take a look at the cold poison in my wife's body, Zhuowen said very seriously. Hearing the word wife, Mu Chunxue rolled her eyes at Zhuowen. However, this kind of expression made the former look even cuter. However, Mu Chunxue couldn't see through Zhuowen anymore. Whether it was the Xiao Hei's dog-like dragon soul, the fox-like Cheng Huang, or the Fushi cauldron that contained Cheng Huang, they all gave her a feeling that she couldn't see through them. Clearly, all three of them were extraordinary items. However, she did not ask too much about it. They were Zhuowen's secrets in the first place. Since Zhuowen was willing to reveal them to her so openly, it was very obvious that Zhuowen already treated her as part of his family. This made Mu Chunxue feel rather sweet inside. Let's get down to business first. I'll deal with you later. Xiao He glanced at Cheng Huang in an extremely unfriendly manner. Soon after, he arrived in front of Zhuo Wen and Mu Chen Shui and said, "Earlier, I checked the condition of this little girl's body through your mind. Most of the meridians in her body are covered in cold poison. It will likely be very troublesome to expel it. How long will it take?" Zhuowen frowned slightly. "If we follow the normal procedure, it'll take around half a year at the very least. At the same time, you'll have to expel the cold poison from her body every once in a while. It's an extremely tedious process," Xiao He said cautiously. Mu Chunxue asked rather worriedly, "Won't it harm Zhuowen?" Xiao He shook his head and said, "Don't worry. This brat Zhuo Wen's life is extremely tough. Your cold poison will not cause too much harm to him. However, expelling the cold qi is an extremely tiring process. This brat should be exhausted to the point of being half dead each time he expels the cold poison." He. Mu Chunxue relaxed when she heard Xiao Hei's words. "Xiao Hei, give me the method of expelling the poison." "I'll try it first," Zhuowen said to Xiao Hei. However, Xiao Hei rubbed her hands and said, "You're not as skilled as me. I'll help your little lover expel the poison. You can just watch from the side." Zhuowen was silent for a moment before softly saying, "Scram." In the end, Xiao Hei taught Zhuowen the method of expelling the poison. At the same time, Zhuowen chased Xiao Hei and Cheng Huang out without any courtesy, leaving only Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue in the room. Silently digesting Xiao Hei's method of expelling the poison, Zhuowen opened his eyes with an awkward look on his face. "What's wrong?" Mu Chunxue could naturally see Zhuowen's strange expression and could not help asking. "Chen Shui, because the cold poison has spread throughout your meridians, if I want to expel it all, I have to inject the 9 flames of karma into your meridians, so." Zhuowen awkwardly scratched his head and said with a smile. Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes turned white and a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. How could she not understand Zhuowen's meaning? There were some meridians in the body that were unavoidably located in sensitive areas. "Could it be that you don't dare?" Suddenly, Mu Chunxue playfully said. Zhuowen rubbed his nose. He had never been intimate with a woman before, so he was still a little conservative in this aspect. Seeing Mu Chunxue ask this, he became even more embarrassed. "My life is at stake, why wouldn't I dare?" Zhuowen said in a deep voice. "Then help me expel the poison." "I'll listen to everything you say," Mu Chunxue said with a smile. "UN." Zhuowen nodded and his eyes became serious. The dark cold poison was the cold energy from the black tortoise's body, and it was a powerful heaven-ranked cold energy. It was very domineering, so in the process of expelling the poison, he could not be the slightest bit careless. "Take off your outer clothes first. It'll be easier to see your meridians this way," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Hearing this, Mu Chunxue gave an ah sound. She secretly looked at Zhuowen and then obediently took off her outer clothes, revealing a pair of pure white jade shoulders. Mu Chunxue was wearing a thin bedding underneath her outer clothes, revealing her pure white back. Her lotus-like arms were pure white and flawless. It was like the world's most perfect work of art, very pleasing to the eye. Chapter 1330. Placing his avatar Zhuowen's attention was completely focused on the 9 flames of karma that was pouring into his meridians. He needed to control the might of the 9 flames of karma. After all, it was a heavenly flame. If anything were to happen to him, Mu Chunxue would suffer. Zhuowen spent an entire hour on the meridians around the meridians on his shoulder before he was able to neutralize and devour the dark cold poison that had adhered to the inner wall. "Is this the dark cold poison?" As he slowly withdrew his hand, Zhuowen discovered that the wisps of 9 flames of karma were wrapped around a black gas. The surface of this gas was emitting a terrifying chill. Even though it was wrapped by the 9 flames of karma, Zhuowen still discovered that his right hand was slightly stiff under this chill. What a powerful chill! Zhuowen's eyes narrowed as he felt this chill. Soon after, he carefully stored the dark cold poison into the ice saint symbol. Next, Zhuowen did the same thing to the other meridians on Mu Chunxue's body. Wisps of flames from the 9 flames of karma were controlled by Zhuowen and poured into Mu Chunshue's body. 20 hours passed. The sky outside turned from white to black, and then from black to white. A ray of sunlight shone through the window. It was a golden yellow, and looked extremely dazzling. Zhuowen slowly withdrew his right hand. His forehead was already dripping with sweat. 20 hours of high concentration was a huge drain on Zhuowen's energy. Now, he even felt a faint pain in his head and a trace of dizziness in his eyes. Suddenly, Zhuowen felt an ice-cold touch on his forehead. Soon after, he saw Mu Chunxue take out a blue handkerchief from her clothes and gently wipe Zhuowen's forehead. Her movements were very gentle and her expression was very focused. "Do you feel better?" Zhuowen asked as he stared calmly at the beautiful woman before him. After wiping away the sweat on Zhuowen's face, Mu Chunxue nodded and said with a smile, "I feel much better now. Originally, because of the cold poison in my meridians, it was rather difficult to circulate the power of the stars in my body. But now, I can circulate it freely. Yes. The cold poison in your body has already taken root, so if you want to completely expel it, you need me to help you expel the poison every once in a while." As he spoke, Zhuowen gently picked up his coat and draped it over Mu Chunshue's shoulders. Then, his hands landed on her shoulders. Their eyes met, and for a moment, both of them were silent. Zhuowen quietly stared at the pair of bright eyes in front of him. Soon after, he lowered his head and gently covered her red lips. Their fiery breaths intertwined and there was a trace of numbness. This kind of feeling was very good and very comfortable. Mu Chunxue gently closed her eyes and gently hugged Zhuowen. Her delicate chin was raised, accepting Zhuowen's fiery actions. After a while, Zhuowen slowly raised his head and softly muttered in her ears, "Chen Shui, I love you. From now on, you are mine. I once said that I would marry you. Moreover, I would pull down the clouds from the 9 heavens and pluck the stars from the sky as my betrothal gift. I believe that I will do it." Mu Chunxue gently nodded. She gently rested her chin on Zhuowen's thick shoulders and said, "It's enough as long as you have me in your heart. My request is not high. As long as we are always together, I will be satisfied." Hugging the woman in his embrace, Zhuowen's right hand tightened. He seriously said, "Don't worry, we will always be together. No one will separate us, no one." Bang! 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 Suddenly, rather unreasonable knocks on the door rang out. Soon after, Xiao He and Cheng Huang suddenly rushed in. Under Zhuowen and Mu Chunshue's shocked gazes, they began to fight again. "Old fox, who do you think you are? You're just a mere artifact spirit of the Fushi cauldron, yet you dare to ride on me? This master will beat you up so badly that even your mother won't be able to recognize you," Xiao He boasted shamelessly. Cheng Huang did not back down either. It waved its paws and bared its fangs. "A black dog dares to act so arrogantly in front of me. You weren't even born when I was born from the Fushi cauldron, yet you want to ride on my head. You don't know how the word death is written. Also, I'm an artifact spirit. I don't have parents, so it's useless even if you beat me up." Watching the two buffoons fight in the room, Zhuowen's head was filled with black lines. In the end, Xiao He and Cheng Huang were both suppressed by Zhuowen using the Fushi cauldron, allowing them to properly reflect on their actions. Xiao He and Cheng Huang's farce naturally attracted the attention of Moyan Wushang's group of 5. The 5 of them entered the room and looked at Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue. Moyan Wushang said, "Has the cold poison in elder sister Chen Shui's body been successfully expelled?" Jianan and Mo Lingtian stood to the side, smiling without saying anything. Their faces revealed smiles that everyone understood. Zhuowen was confused by this. "A portion of it has been expelled. If you want to expel all of it, I'm afraid it will take some time," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. "So it's like that," Moyan Wushang said with some disappointment. "Zhuowen, Wushang, and Qingyin, after I return, I have to return to Sky Capital Peak to hand in the killing mission, so I have to go back first," Mu Chunxue suddenly said. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. "You're leaving so soon?" "Fat." Mu Chunxue giggled. "Sky Capital Peak is in the inner court anyway. It's not easy for us to meet. Also, the core disciple selection will begin in half a year. Wushang, Qingyin, work hard and strive to enter the 9 peaks to become core disciples. In the inner court, only core disciples can come into contact with the true cultivation techniques and resources of the inner court. So, becoming core disciples is necessary, Mu Chunxue reminded them seriously. Moyan Wushang and the others nodded seriously. They naturally understood this point. Zhuowen, you've just entered the inner court, so you're not familiar with the inner court. This jade slip contains all the information about the inner court. It should be helpful to you. Also, this is my communication jade slip. If something happens, I'll inform you. After saying that, Mu Chunxue took out a jade slip and handed them to Zhuowen. The latter naturally put them away. Mu Chunxue was right. He had just arrived and knew little about the inner court. He really needed to know more about it. Mu Chunxue chatted with Zhuowen, Moyan Wushang, Qingyin, and the others for a while before leaving the White Jade Pavilion. This time, Mu Chunxue's mission was to take the head of the Yakshaw jellyfish. Of course, Zhuowen didn't only give Mu Chunxue the head of the Yakshaw jellyfish, but also the head of the Black Widow and 9 firmaments. Being able to obtain the heads of 3 criminals on the crime list at once, Mu Chunxue's reward must be quite extraordinary. After all, she had completed an additional killing mission. Brother Zhuo, sister-in-law is really beautiful. I find myself admiring you more and more. As soon as Mu Chunxue left, Kanan couldn't help but give Zhuowen a thumbs up. Strangely, Mo Lingtian, who was following behind Kanan, also gave him a thumbs up. Zhuowen was somewhat baffled. Oh, by the way, Zhuowen, what's that dog and fox quarreling outside the door? They can talk, and their words are so vulgar. It's as if they have become spirits. Moyan Wushang suddenly asked. Zhuowen's face darkened. Xiao He and Cheng Huang didn't know how to restrain themselves. They dared to mess around outside the room. Now, Moyan Wushang and the others knew about their existence. They are my pets. They have high spiritual intelligence, but their strength is a little weak. Zhuowen laughed. He didn't elaborate on Xiao He and Cheng Huang's situation. Seeing Zhuowen's expression, Moyan Wushang knew that he didn't want to talk about it. So, she wisely didn't ask again. Now, I have to make a trip to mysterious Yuan Peak. Since Xiao Yu gave me the identity token of his direct disciple, he has ignored me. I have to go and take a look. Zhuowen nodded. After exchanging some pleasantries with everyone, Zhuowen bid farewell and left the White Jade Pavilion. On the way to mysterious Yuan Peak, Zhuowen said to Cheng Huang in his Sea of Consciousness, "Little Huang, how many extreme yin pure yang pills and 9 patterned green spirit pills can I refine with the energy of the extreme yin golden crow and 9-tailed centipede in my body?" Cheng Huang, who was in the jade cauldron, was silent for a while. Then, he roared in exasperation, "Don't give me a nickname. You can't give me the nickname Little Huang. Do you think I'm that black dog? That name is too tacky. Only Black Dog is more suitable. Oh, bastard Black Dog, you actually bit me again. I'll fight you to the death." Cheng Huang's expression was exceptionally emotional. However, a miserable shriek was soon heard. Zhuowen rubbed his temples. He had had enough of these 2 enemies. After the 2 guys stopped for a while, Zhuowen got Cheng Huang's agreement. If the 2 elixirs didn't fail, they could refine about 15 pills each. The output was very low. Zhuowen was also a little helpless. He didn't expect that the extreme yin golden crow and 9-tailed centipede could only refine 15 pills. The number was too little. At the same time, Cheng Huang also took out the 2 elixir recipes from the Fushi cauldron. There were various kinds of medicinal herbs written in it, and each of them was not ordinary or cheap. Zhuowen felt a headache coming. It seems that I have to learn about mysterious Yuan Peak first. After all, this is the inner yard. There must be a place to exchange things. Moreover, its foundation and resources must be much more abundant than the outer yard. There should be these medicinal herbs. However, before that, I have to arrange for my 2 doppelgangers. Thinking of this, the Buddha demon eye appeared between Zhuowen's eyebrows. The Buddha demon eye split into the Buddha demon eye and the demon eye, forming a Buddhist doppelganger and a demon doppelganger. The Great Thunderclap Temple in the Divine Netherrealm is more suitable for your Buddhist doppelganger, while the Desolate Netherrealm in the Nine Netherrealm is more suitable for your demon doppelganger. The Buddha Demon Eye is an item of the Fighting Buddha Demon Saint. In theory, it is also a sacred weapon, but an extremely special one. If you want to unleash the power of the Buddha Demon Eye, you have to let your demon doppelganger and Buddhist doppelganger both advance to the pilgrimage realm. At that time, when the two become one, you should be able to unlock the true power of the Buddha Demon Eye. Chapter 1331. Mysterious Nether Point. You're right. The inner yard doesn't have any special cultivation methods of Buddhism and Devil Tao. It's not good for the development of my two doppelgangers. Now, it's the best choice to let these two doppelgangers cultivate in the Great Thunderclap Temple and the Desolate Nether Realm. Zhuowen nodded. Xiao Hei's suggestion was undoubtedly the most pertinent and suitable. Therefore, Zhuowen used the 100 transformation technique to change the appearances of his two clones and sent them out of the inner academy. The Buddhist clone headed to the Great Lightning Tune Temple, while the demonic Tao clone followed the ultimate Devil Master to the Desolate Nether Realm. In the near future, the Great Lightning Tune Temple and the Desolate Nether Realm would have two heaven-defying geniuses rise at the same time. Of course, all of this was in the future. As for the 9 flames karmic fire on the Buddhist clone, Zhuowen naturally kept it back into his main body. After all, helping Mu Chunxue expel the cold poison still required it. Kid. I wonder if the contribution points in the contribution counter you brought from the outer academy can be used in the inner academy. Why don't you go and ask? This Dragon Lord seems to remember that there are over 2,600,000 contribution points in your contribution counter, right? Xiao Hei suddenly reminded. Zhuowen slapped his head and said, I would have forgotten if you didn't mention it. I will go and ask the administrator of the bottom of the 9 peaks, Zhong Shui. As he spoke, Zhuowen walked towards the tower-like building at the bottom of the 9 peaks. Zhong Shui was still dozing off with her right hand resting on her cheek. Zhuowen was like this every time he saw her. This made Zhuowen feel rather speechless. Looking at the window, Zhong Shui cast a sidelong glance as if she had recognized Zhuowen. She said, Are you the little brat that Senior Mo Yang brought here not long ago? Zhuowen's face was filled with black lines. He felt a little strange to be called a little brat by a girl who was about the same age as him. However, he did not care about this detail. Instead, he handed the contribution counter to Zhong Shui and said, I brought this contribution counter from the outer academy. I wonder if it can be used in the inner academy. Also, does the inner court have the corresponding exchange points? Zhong Shui looked at the number on the contribution counter and said, Looks like you're doing pretty well in the outer court, to actually be able to leave behind so many contribution points. These contribution points can indeed be used in the inner court, but in the inner court, they're not called contribution points, but divine nether points. Furthermore, contribution points and divine nether points are not equivalent, but 1 to 100. In other words, 100 contribution points is equivalent to 1 divine nether point. Zhuowen was startled, and then asked probingly, Then the exchange value of the divine nether point and the contribution points is also 1 to 100? Who knew that Zhong Shui would shake her head and smile? The value of the exchange items is 1 to 1. If you exchange for the same item in the outer courtyard, the amount of divine nether points and contribution points required in the inner courtyard is the same. Zhuowen was silent for a moment, and his eyelids twitched without end. Isn't this too much of a trap? Imperceptibly, the value of the 2,600,000 contribution points on him had shrunk by 100 times, becoming 26,000 divine nether points. Furthermore, the items he exchanged for were of the same value as the contribution points. Zhuowen felt a little pain in his heart, and a little pain in his flesh. Then I might as well use my contribution points to exchange for things in the inner court. Zhuowen said somewhat indignantly. The corner of Zhong Shui's mouth curled up, and said, I'm sorry, contribution points cannot be exchanged for anything in the inner court. The inner court only recognizes divine nether points. Even if you have 2,600,000 contribution points on you, they are worthless in the inner court. Hearing that, Zhuowen felt as if 10,000 mud horses were running through his mind. The system of the inner court was obviously a scam. Helpless, Zhuoan sighed, then I'll change it to divine nether points. The corner of Zhong Shue's mouth curled up, and she spread out her hands. Hand over your official disciple identity token to me. The divine nether points are not recorded in the contribution points counter, but in your inner court identity token. Zhuoan gloomily handed over the identity token to Zhong Shui. Then, Zhong Shue's face suddenly stiffened, and she subconsciously asked, I say, did you take the wrong identity token? Zhuoan raised his head and said doubtfully, no, this is my new identity token. This identity token is exclusive to direct disciples. How can you have this kind of identity token? Zhong Shui cautiously sized up the young man in front of her, and the corner of her mouth curled up in surprise. She knew that this young man in front of her had only entered the inner court with Moyan and Bai Yang for less than a month, and he had become a direct disciple in less than a month. This was simply inconceivable. Could it be that this identity token can be stolen and used by oneself? Zhuoan frowned, and said with some displeasure. Only then did Zhong Shui react. The identity token of a direct disciple was unique, and was personally refined by the 9 Peak Masters. Without the permission of the Peak Masters, one could not use it unless one was a direct disciple. However, the identity token of a direct disciple in front of her was dazzling, and clearly did not seem to be a token that could not be used. Zhong Shui understood that what Zhuoan said was not false, but she subconsciously felt that it was impossible, so she raised her doubts. If there are no problems, quickly exchange it. Zhuoan said indifferently. Zhong Shui looked at Zhuoan with a complicated expression, and then quickly carved the divine nether points on the identity token, and handed it over to Zhuoan. After receiving the identity token, Zhuoan waved his hand, and directly left the pagoda-like building, leaving Zhong Shui staring at the departing figure in a daze. Am I hallucinating? This brat has clearly entered the inner academy for less than a month, and was only an official disciple before. In the blink of an eye, he has become a direct disciple. Could it be that I have been dozing off too much recently, and am having hallucinations? Zhong Shui shook her head, and soon after, she carelessly held her chin with her right hand, and began to doze off, as if she had already forgotten everything that had just happened. After passing through the heart of the 9 peaks, Zhuoan arrived at the foot of the mysterious Yuan Peak. He took out the identity token that Xiao Yu had given him, and entered with a swoosh. Sky Capital Peak, Zhaixing Pavilion. Mu Chunxue slowly came to the front of the hall. The layout of the hall was very simple. Other than the 4 stone pillars in the surroundings, there was a high platform in front. On the high platform, there were 3 thumb-sized incense sticks, and white smoke curled up in the hall, emitting a refreshing fragrance. In front of the hall, stood an old man in a long robe. He had his hands behind his back, and calmly stared at the front of the hall. No one knew what he was thinking. The aura of this old man was faintly discernible, as if he was an old man in his twilight years. About 5 meters away from this old man, stood a slender figure. This figure was a young man around 26 or 27 years old. He carried an ancient long sword on his back, and his face was quite handsome. His eyes were blazing with sharpness, like an unsheathed sword. Junior Sister Chen Shui, you're back. I wonder how the mission went. The young man with the long sword on his back stared at Mu Chunxue, who was walking in from the entrance. The sharpness in his eyes slowly faded, and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Hello, senior brother Jian Mu. The mission went very smoothly. Mu Chunxue replied indifferently. In response to Mu Chunxue's cold and indifferent attitude, the young man did not feel anything out of the ordinary. A warm smile still hung from the corners of his mouth. However, his expression soon stiffened as he discovered that Mu Chunxue had directly retrieved 3 heads from her spirit ring. Gululu. The sound of the heads rolling on the ground echoed in the hall. Black Widow, Yakshaw Jellyfish, and Ju Xiao. The smile on the young man's mouth was a little stiff, but soon it became more and more intense. He said with a smile, as expected of junior sister Chen Shui, to be able to kill the 9th, 10th, and 11th experts of the Sin List at the same time. After completing this mission, junior sister Chen Shui will be qualified to cultivate the strongest technique of my Sky Capital Peak, Heavenly Inquiring Ancient Scripture. With junior sister's talent, successfully cultivating the heavenly inquiring ancient scripture and igniting the fifth beacon of sky capital peak should be more than enough. The young man said with a smile. Who would have thought that Mu Chunxue would shake her head and say, "These 3 people were not killed by me, but by Zhuowen. He helped me complete this mission." When these words came out, the hall became quiet. The smile on the young man's face froze, and his face gradually became serious. He said, "Zhuowen? How is that possible? It's impossible for him to be so strong." Mu Chunxue raised her brows and stared at the young man. "Senior brother Jian Mu, how do you know that it's impossible for Zhuowen to be so strong? Could it be that you've seen him before?" Jian Mu's eyes flickered and he sighed. "Ari, when I was pestering you, didn't you say that you had a sweetheart? After that, I went to the outer court to inquire and found out that the person's name was Zhuowen. He seemed to be a nobody from a low-level region of the Qing Xian Empire. Therefore, I left the inner court back then to meet Zhuowen. After arriving at the desolate ancient city from the Sea of Misery, I stayed there for a day. I planned to go to the Qing Xian Empire the next day, but I didn't expect to meet that little guy there. But at that time, that little guy's cultivation was pitifully weak, only at the sovereign stage." Jian Mu shook his head, obviously not believing Mu Chunshue's words. Mu Chunxue calmly looked at Jian Mu, but did not say anything. However, she felt a surge of excitement in her heart. She was excited for Zhuowen. She knew that Zhuowen had left the inner court a year ago. At that time, Zhuowen was only at the sovereign stage. But now, Zhuowen had reached the second heaven emperor stage. Such a speed of advancement was definitely worthy of being called a monstrous genius. Moreover, that was not all. The strength that Zhuowen had displayed caused her to be indescribably shocked. Perhaps, the current Zhuowen's battle strength was still a little inferior to Jian Mu's. However, that was because Zhuowen's cultivation was not high. Once Zhuowen's cultivation increased, he would likely be able to crush Jian Mu. He might even be able to contend against the strongest monster in Sky Capital Peak. "Jian Mu, you can leave first. I still have something to say to Chen Shui." Jian Mu, who was facing the old man with his hands behind his back, spoke in an ancient voice. Jian Mu nodded and left the hall in an extremely respectful manner. Of course, after leaving, Jian Mu began to inquire about Zhuowen. He never expected that Zhuowen would actually come to the inner court. The speed of his arrival made him have a whole new level of respect for him. After Jian Mu left, the old man slowly turned around. His hawk-like gaze fell on Mu Chunxue as he softly said, "Your cold poison acted up in advance. But it seems like someone helped you suppress it temporarily." Chapter 1332. Mysterious Origin Peak. Is it Zhuowen? Old man Tiandu's eyes flickered as he asked in a deep voice. Mu Chunxue was silent for a moment, then nodded. The corner of old man Tiandu's mouth curled. "This Zhuowen is indeed not bad. If he really killed the Black Widow, Yakshaw Jellyfish, and Zhu Xiao at the same time as you said, then his strength and talent are unquestionable." "Master, what do you mean?" Mu Chunxue asked in surprise. "Haha. This old man has naturally recognized Zhuowen's talent, so I plan to accept him as my personal disciple." Old man Tiandu stroked his long white beard with his right hand and smiled. Mu Chunxue was startled, then smiled bitterly. "Master, Zhuowen has already been accepted as a personal disciple by martial uncle Xiao Yu." As soon as these words came out, old man Tiandu's right hand suddenly froze, and his expression stiffened. Then he frowned slightly. "Madman Xiao can actually see that little guy Zhuowen is extraordinary. Doesn't this madman only know how to study origin arrays and the void immortal scripture?" At this moment, Mu Chunxue also felt a little regretful. At that time, she was the one who suggested that Xiao Yu accept Zhuowen as his personal disciple. She knew that Zhuowen was also talented in spiritual power, but she didn't know the specific realm. But in any case, Zhuowen was also a dual cultivator. Under normal circumstances, entering Mysterious Origin Peak was not bad. Even if Mysterious Origin Peak was the last of the 9 peaks, the treatment of a personal disciple would definitely not be bad. Now, old man Tiandu suddenly proposed to accept Zhuowen as his personal disciple. Between Tiandu Peak and Mysterious Origin Peak, one was the strongest peak, and the other was the weakest peak. As long as one wasn't a fool, one would know which peak to choose. Master, why don't we ask Martial Uncle Shao for him? Mu Chenshue's beautiful eyes flashed, and she asked tentatively. Old man Tian Du shook his head. It's not like you don't know that madman Shao Yu. He has a very stubborn temper. Even I can't take the things in his hands. Since Zhuowen has been accepted as his personal disciple, then everything will depend on Zhuowen's luck. Mu Chunshue nodded and didn't say anything. Her personality was originally quite cold, and Mysterious Origin Peak was indeed not bad. After all, the strongest technique of Mysterious Origin Peak, the Void Immortal Scripture, was extremely powerful. Even if Zhuowen couldn't comprehend it completely, he would still gain something. It would have an indelible effect on his martial way and mental strength. The structure of Mysterious Origin Peak was completely different from that of Tiandu Peak. As soon as he stepped into Mysterious Origin Peak, Zhuowen felt a vast pressure of mind power. However, Zhuowen was not affected at all. He walked silently to the top of the mountain. Zhuowen took out the jade strip that Mu Chunshue had given him as he climbed the mountain. He knew that it contained all the information about the Inner Academy. For a rookie like him who had just entered the Inner Academy, this information was indeed very important. There was a lot of information within the Jade Scroll. It introduced the structure of the entire Inner Academy and the maps of the 9 main peaks. Other than this, there was also some information about the structure of the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall in the middle of the 9 peaks. The information recorded within was not far from what the Ice and Fire Sacred Symbol Spirit had described back then. The Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Palace was divided into 18 levels. Each level contained ice and fire energy. This kind of ice and fire energy merged together. It was an extremely wild and violent energy. If one was not careful, one could be crushed into dust by this wild and violent energy. Of course, if you were able to withstand this ice and fire energy, then this violent energy would temper the energy in your body's meridians, refining out the excess impurities. This would allow the cultivator's energy to be sublimated, and their might would rise to a whole new level. The deeper one went into the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall, the stronger the tempering effect would be. The cultivators who cultivated inside would often be much stronger than ordinary cultivators. Of course, it would also be much easier for them to break through. In addition to the Ice and Fire Dual Extreme Hall, Zhuowen also noticed that the Jade Slip mentioned the number of direct disciples of the 9 peaks. Among them, Sky Capital Peak had the most direct disciples with a total of 4. The other 8 peaks basically only had 2 or 3 direct disciples. For example, Zhuowen's Ao Yuan Peak only had 1 direct disciple. However, if Zhuowen was included, there would be 2 direct disciples. However, Zhuowen was a direct disciple that Shao Yu had just accepted not long ago. Therefore, it was naturally impossible for the Jade Slip to record Zhuowen's name. Furthermore, there is a ranking of the personal disciples listed in the Jade Slip. When Zhuowen saw this, he was quite surprised. The ranking in the Jade Slip was called the Divine List. There were only 20 people on it and they were all direct disciples of the 9 peaks. Among them, the first direct disciple of Sky Capital Peak, Yang Yi, was ranked first on the Divine List. The second was Fu Yu from Divine Devil Peak, and the third was someone Zhuowen was familiar with. The second direct disciple of Sky Capital Peak, Zhen Mu? So he's an inner courtyard disciple. When his gaze fell on the third name on the Divine List, Zhuowen couldn't help but murmur softly. He was naturally familiar with the name Zhen Mu. Back then, he had met Zhen Mu in the desolate ancient city. At that time, Zhuowen's cultivation base was only at the Venerable Realm, while Zhen Mu was already at the 7th Heavenly Monarch Realm. The gap between the two of them was like a chasm. At that time, Zhuowen could only look up to Zhen Mu. With Zhen Mu's talent, he must have made a breakthrough in the past year. However, Zhuowen was no longer the insignificant Sovereign Realm warrior back then. He was a true Emperor Realm expert. Even if he encountered a high-level Emperor Realm expert, Zhuowen wouldn't be afraid. It seems that Zhen Mu's appearance in the desolate ancient city wasn't a coincidence. His purpose was to find me. Zhuowen whispered, his eyes flickering. As he continued to browse, Zhuowen found that Mu Chunxue was ranked 17th on the divine list, while the only direct disciple of Ao Yuan Peak, Lu Qing, was ranked last. This really surprised Zhuowen. After all, Lu Qing was the only direct disciple in the entire Ao Yuan Peak. There was only one direct disciple, and he was ranked last on the divine list. It seemed that the decline of Ao Yuan Peak wasn't groundless. After browsing through the information, Zhuowen also found a map of the inner courtyard in the jade slip. There were various markings on it, which looked very convenient. While browsing the information, Zhuowen unknowingly arrived at the top of Ao Yuan Peak. Is this Ao Yuan Peak? This scene is a little different from what I imagined. When Zhuowen finally arrived at the top of Ao Yuan Peak, he was stunned. This was because the mountaintop platform in front of him was large enough, but there were very few buildings on it. Not only that, but Zhuowen could also see very few people on it. In the middle of the platform, there was a rather inconspicuous row of large wooden houses. The door was wide open, and it was dark inside. When he saw this scene, the corners of Zhuowen's eyes and mouth began to twitch unceasingly. Soon after, he recalled the capital sky peak that he had gone to with Moyan and Bai Yang. When he recalled the bustling crowd and the magnificent and prosperous buildings at the peak of the mountain, Zhuowen suddenly felt that he had been cheated. The capital sky peak and Ao Yuan Peak were both among the 9 main peaks, but the gap between capital sky peak and Ao Yuan Peak was not small. Shaking his head and sighing, Zhuowen stepped onto the platform. In front of a small bamboo house near the platform, a woman in a grey robe slowly sat cross-legged. This woman had a head of jet-black hair that was casually coiled up with a wooden hairpin at the back of her head, giving her a unique charm. Although this woman's appearance was slightly inferior to Mu Chenshue's, she was definitely one of the top beauties. Especially the peaceful aura that emanated from her body, it had a special attraction. Zhuowen looked around and found that there was no one else here except for this woman. He walked straight over. The grey-robed woman also saw Zhuowen walking over. She slowly stood up and stared calmly at Zhuowen with her beautiful eyes. When Zhuowen came in front of her, she looked up and down at Zhuowen and said with a smile, "May I know which peak this junior brother came from? What is your purpose in coming to Ao Yuan Peak?" Zhuowen spread out his hands and said, "Greetings, senior sister. In fact, I am a direct disciple that Xiao Yu of Ao Yuan Peak has just accepted. My name is Zhuowen." As soon as these words came out, the grey-robed woman's face stiffened. She frowned and said, "A new direct disciple? Why didn't Master mention this?" Zhuowen was a little embarrassed, but he still took out the identity token that Xiao Yu had given him and handed it to the grey-robed woman. He said, "This is the identity token that Xiao Yu gave me before. It should be able to prove that what I said is true, right?" The grey-robed woman glanced at the token in Zhuowen's hand. Her eyes revealed a trace of surprise. She looked at Zhuowen with a little surprise and nodded. "You are right. This is indeed the identity token of a direct disciple, but Master didn't mention it before he came back." Zhuowen's expression was somewhat unsightly. That Xiao Yu was too careless. Since he had accepted Zhuowen as his personal disciple, he should have at least notified Zhuowen. However, he did not even mention it, as if he had completely forgotten about it. "The identity token can't be fake. My name is Lu Qing, and I am also Master's direct disciple. In the future, we will be senior sister and junior brother. We will take good care of each other." Lu Qing's eyes curved into crescents as she said to Zhuowen with a smile, "So it's senior sister Lu Qing. I have seen the inner yard divine list. You are ranked 20th. You can be regarded as an influential figure in the inner yard," Zhuowen said with a smile. Lu Qing shook his head, "I can't be considered a famous figure. Among all the direct disciples of the 9 peaks, I'm already ranked at the bottom. Even Mu Chenshui, who just entered the inner courtyard not long ago, is ranked higher than me. Let's not talk about this. Junior brother Zhuowen, you should be here to look for Master this time, right?" Zhuowen nodded and said, "Senior sister is right. After all, I am already a direct disciple of Ao Yuan Peak. Naturally, I will be cultivating here in the future. So this time, I came to see the situation of Ao Yuan Peak. However, the situation of Ao Yuan Peak is unexpectedly deserted. Chapter 1333. Do mountain. Most of the cultivation methods practiced by Ao Yuan Peak require the immortal force formed from the combination of mental energy and Yuan power. Although there are also one-sided cultivation methods, they are much weaker than the other 8 main peaks. Moreover, there are very few cultivators who practice dual cultivation. Moreover, if one's talent is not strong, one's mental energy and Yuan power cultivation will fall behind and become a burden. Therefore, most of the cultivators who enter the inner academy will rarely choose Ao Yuan Peak. This is also the reason why there are so few disciples in Ao Yuan Peak. At this point, the corner of Lu Qing's mouth revealed a bitter smile. Obviously, the current situation of Ao Yuan Peak really worried her. No matter where it was, as long as it was a force, it needed fresh blood to develop and grow. Otherwise, this force would eventually reach its end, and Ao Yuan Feng was undoubtedly in such a state. Most of the cultivation methods in Ao Yuan Peak had harsh requirements. It required the immortal force formed from the combination of Yuan power and mental energy. Moreover, the most famous void immortal scripture was something that even peak master Shao Yu could not successfully practice. This caused many talented disciples to give up on Ao Yuan Peak. Over time, Ao Yuan Peak became more and more deserted. In the end, it became the worst main peak of the 9 peaks in the inner academy. The strange thing was that the peak master of Ao Yuan Peak, Shao Yu, was commonly known as Madman Shao in the inner academy. He was an extremely temperamental guy. After taking over Ao Yuan Peak, this guy buried himself in research all day long. He simply did not care about anything in Ao Yuan Peak. This caused the original batch of disciples in Ao Yuan Peak to be disheartened. One by one, they went to the other 8 main peaks. If Lu Qing was not in charge of Ao Yuan Peak, it was likely that the entire Ao Yuan Peak would have been deserted and become a dead mountain. Hearing Lu Qing's narration, Zhuowen sighed softly. Now, he felt as if he had boarded a pirate ship. If he knew that Ao Yuan Peak was so deserted, he would not have readily agreed to become Shao Yu's direct disciple. Right now, there are still more than 10 core disciples in Ao Yuan Peak. If it wasn't for me, I'm afraid that these core disciples would have left and joined other peaks. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let me take you to find a place to stay. The more Lu Qing spoke, the more bitter his face became. In the end, he waved his hand dispiritedly, intending to bring Zhuowen to choose a place to stay. Aren't we going to look for senior Shao Yu? Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Junior brother Zhuowen, you don't know Master's personality. He is a research madman. If he were to focus on his research, it would take him at least a month or 2. Previously, when he came back, he locked himself in the wooden house. Clearly, he was researching something again. Now, you can't see him at all, Lu Qing explained. Zhuowen was speechless, but he didn't care too much. This time, he came to Mysterious Origin Peak for a quiet environment. In addition, he was on Mysterious Origin Peak, so the heaven and earth Yuan Qi here was far richer than at the bottom of the 9 peaks. It was more suitable for cultivation. As for meeting Shao Yu, it was just a matter of convenience. Then I'll have to trouble senior sister to arrange a place to stay, Zhuowen said with a smile. Lu Qing waved his hand and said with a smile, "You're welcome. We're all on the same side. Hello, senior sister Lu Qing, senior sister Lu." In the process of bringing Zhuowen deeper into the platform, they met some other disciples along the way. These disciples greeted Lu Qing one after another, and Lu Qing responded with a smile. Senior sister Lu Qing, who is this brother? Lu Qing and Zhuowen stopped in front of a simple bamboo house. The bamboo house had 2 floors, and there was a tall frame at the bottom. At that moment, a rather simple and honest man walked out of the bamboo house. He had thick eyebrows and large eyes, and he stared at Zhuowen and asked in puzzlement. Junior brother Zhuowen, this is junior brother Dushan, the number 1 core disciple of Mysterious Origin Peak. This bamboo house is very large, and there are many rooms inside. It's a bit of a waste for junior brother Dushan to live alone. You can live with him in this bamboo house, Lu Qing said with a smile. Junior brother Dushan, this is junior brother Zhuo Wen. He is a direct disciple that Master Xiao Yu has just accepted. The two of you should get to know each other better in the future. After speaking, Lu Qing instructed the simple and honest man. Direct disciple? Dushan was startled, and then looked at Zhuowen strangely. Then, he decisively gave a thumbs up and said, Brother Zhuowen, you really have guts. You actually dare to become Master Xiao Yu's direct disciple. Dushan admires you. Zhuowen's eyelids twitched. Now he understood that becoming Xiao Yu's direct disciple was probably not a good thing. By the way, senior sister Lu Qing, it is said that the strongest cultivation technique of mysterious origin peak is the void immortal scripture. What are the conditions for comprehending the void immortal scripture? Zhuowen suddenly asked. Lu Qing chuckled, and Dushan laughed even more. Then, Lu Qing said with a strange expression, it seems that junior brother Zhuowen really doesn't know anything. Looking at the expressions of these two people, Zhuowen's eyes became more and more confused. What should he know? Generally speaking, the strongest cultivation technique of the 9 peaks needs to be completed by the peak master before being qualified to learn it. Moreover, you must be a direct disciple. However, our mysterious origin peak is an exception. Regardless of whether it is a core disciple or a direct disciple, you can comprehend the void immortal scripture at will, Lu Qing explained with a smile. What's the use of comprehending it at will? Anyway, we can't understand it, so it's useless to read it, Dushan finally muttered. Looking at Dushan's deep resentment, it seemed that the void immortal scripture was really difficult to comprehend. After all, even someone like Xiao Yu couldn't comprehend it, let alone the disciples of mysterious origin peak. Dushan, you can't say that. The void immortal scripture is known as the strongest cultivation technique of the inner yard. Naturally, it has its own uniqueness. Didn't mysterious origin peak have a peerless genius, Senior Yuanji? Even if he completely comprehended the void immortal scripture, he would still be able to reach such a terrifying realm. Even the Azure Dragon Hall Master couldn't do anything to Senior Yuanji. How powerful and carefree is that? Speaking of Yuanji, Lu Qing's beautiful eyes flashed with a bright light, which contained a kind of emotion called worship. Senior sister Lu Qing, Senior Yuanji is abnormal, a demon. How can we compare to him? Now, I haven't even comprehended the immortal art technique, let alone the void immortal scripture. Dushan muttered in a low voice. Although we don't have the terrifying talent and comprehension of Senior Yuanji, hard work can make up for it. As long as we put in the effort and persevere, although we can't guarantee that we will be able to comprehend the void immortal scripture, at least we will gain more than if we don't work hard, right? Lu Qing looked very calm, and the corners of her mouth were slightly curved. That kind of peaceful smile was like a majestic wind blowing in the field, so natural and comfortable, which made Zhuowen's eyes reveal a trace of amazement. Senior sister Lu Qing, I'm not you. You are a genius who has completely comprehended the immortal Dao technique. When the time comes, you will definitely be able to rely on the immortal Dao technique to further comprehend the void immortal sutra and eventually become the second Senior Yuanji. Dushan grinned. Your mouth is getting sweeter and sweeter. I'll leave Junior Zhuowen to you. You can tell him about the void immortal scripture. Lu Qing rolled her eyes at Dushan, then extended her slender hand and handed a jade-colored scroll to Zhuowen. She said, this scroll records the immortal art technique. The so-called immortal Dao technique is actually a simplified version of the Void Celestial Sutra. It was Master Xiao Yu's own summary after studying the Void Celestial Sutra for many years. If you can cultivate this immortal Dao technique, it should be much easier to understand the Void Celestial Sutra. Taking the jade-colored scroll, Zhuowen stared at the beautiful figure that was slowly leaving with a trace of gratitude in his eyes. Brother Zhuowen, before you comprehend the immortal art technique, you must first master immortal force. You have to know that immortal force is very difficult to master. Although you are a direct disciple, I can first teach you how to combine mental energy and yuan power to create immortal force on behalf of Master. Dushan casually walked to Zhuowen's side. Soon after, His right hand pinched the air in a rather showy manner. Soon after, he let out a loud roar filled with vigor. Soon after, the mental energy and yuan power within his body began to gather in his palm. After about 10 minutes, cold sweat began to appear on Dushan's forehead. Finally, a thumbnail-sized milky white immortal force appeared in his palm. Holding the thumbnail-sized milky white immortal force, Dushan was extremely satisfied. His eyes even contained a trace of excitement. In the past, it was Lu Qing who guided him in fusing immortal force. Now, he could finally enjoy teaching others. Moreover, this person was Xiao Yu's new direct disciple. Thinking of this, Dushan felt a little excited. Therefore, Dushan struck a pose and looked at Zhuo Wen with a smug look in his eyes. Brother Zhuo Wen, did you see clearly how I fused the immortal energy? If you don't understand, I can do it again. This time, I will slow down. You have to concentrate and watch carefully. Zhuo Wen rolled his dead fish eyes and stared at Dushan, who felt good about himself. Dushan had the nerve to show off in front of him with just that little bit of immortal force. Zhuo Wen could not see through Dushan's thoughts at this moment. Zhuo Wen helplessly nodded and said, Brother Dushan, I saw it clearly. There's no need to demonstrate anymore. You really saw it clearly? Why don't you demonstrate it to me now? Dushan asked in disbelief. Zhuo Wen didn't waste his breath. He gently extended his right hand, and mental energy and yuan power converged at the center of his palm. Subsequently, a powerful pressure surged out, and a palm-sized ball of milky white celestial energy surged out from Zhuo Wen's palm. It soared into the sky with dazzling radiance. Dushan's face instantly stiffened. Then, he looked at the fingernail-sized immortal force in his palm and then looked at the palm-sized immortal force in Zhuo Wen's hand. Chapter 1334. The Law of the Void. Thus, Zhuo Wen settled down in Mysterious Origin Peak. There was a unique tranquility here, and there were not many disturbances. He liked this environment and feeling very much. The night gradually darkened. In the room, the dim candlelight swayed with the wind. Zhuo Wen sat quietly on the bamboo bed, and Xiao Hei's voice rang in his mind. Boy, the matter of your residence has been settled. I think you should deal with the materials for the Lunar Pure Yang pill and the 9-patterned Green Spirit pill. Zhuo Wen rubbed his temples and said, Of course I know. There are many medicinal herbs in Mysterious Origin Peak. I will go to Senior Sister Lu Qing tomorrow and exchange for the corresponding medicinal herbs. The 9 main peaks had their corresponding exchange offices. Generally, the core disciples were responsible for the exchange. However, Mysterious Origin Peak was short of manpower, so Lu Qing took the initiative to undertake the task of exchange. Moreover, Lu Qing was also an arcana master and knew how to cultivate spiritual herbs. Thus, exchanging for medicinal herbs with Lu Qing was undoubtedly the most suitable. Since this immortal path technique is a simplified version of the Void Immortal scripture, why don't I read it first and see if I can find some clues? Zhuo Wen's gaze fell on the jade-colored scroll in his hand as he muttered to himself. Then, he opened it with a swoosh. What entered his eyes was rows upon rows of graceful characters in small seal script that covered the entire scroll. Zhuo Wen's eyes slowly narrowed as he silently stared at the contents of the scroll. He revealed a wisp of seriousness because he noticed that he couldn't understand it at all. It wasn't that he couldn't understand the words, but he couldn't understand the contents. If the words in the scroll were separated one by one, Zhuo Wen could naturally understand them. However, once they were combined together, he began to feel confused. It was as if he was reading a wordless heavenly book. What a strange scroll. Frowning slightly, Zhuo Wen muttered in a low voice. However, Zhuo Wen did not believe in heresy. He began to concentrate on the scroll in his hand. He had inherited by Fang's sea of consciousness and knowledge. His foundation was much stronger than that of an ordinary arcana master. Zhuo Wen believed that with his current foundation, the immortal path technique would not be difficult for him. What he needed now was time to ponder over the immortal Tao technique in his hands. 2 hours, 4 hours. Zhuo Wen continued to stare at the scroll, not moving an inch, until the weather turned slightly cold. Suddenly, Zhuowen noticed that the words in the scroll began to move. A Xiao Hei dot appeared in the middle of the scroll. Then, a suction force appeared in the black dot, and the surrounding dense black words flowed into the black dot in a clockwise direction. Zhuowen's thoughts also entered the depths of the black spot under this suction force. This was an endless expanse of space. There was nothing in the surroundings, only endless darkness. Zhuowen took a step forward in space, and then he was stunned to discover that he had crossed 1,000,000 kilometers with this step. In the blink of an eye, he had vanished from the spot and arrived at an extremely distant place. Kai! A strange sound rang out. Then, Zhuowen was stunned to discover that an invisible blade of air suddenly swept over from the left side of the void. Then, he was shocked to discover that the blade of air had cut open the void infinitely far away and drilled into it. However, when the blade of air reappeared, it was already very close to him. The flowing qi blade landed between Zhuowen's eyebrows. Zhuowen could only watch as the qi blade pierced through his forehead, and his body was split into two. Half. Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes. His forehead and back were covered in cold sweat. Soon after, he looked around and discovered that he was not in an endless expanse of space, but an ancient bamboo house. Was that an illusion? Frowning, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the scroll in his hand. The scroll was still covered in dense black words, as if nothing had happened. Law of the Void. Kid, your consciousness was brought into the boundless void just now. It was caused by the law of the void in this scroll. Suddenly, Xiao Hei appeared on Zhuowen's shoulder at some unknown time. A pair of small eyes fell on the scroll, and her voice was solemn and cold. Void law? Is it also a type of Saint Rune law? Zhuowen asked in puzzlement. Yes, and it's an extremely powerful and high-grade law. It's many times more powerful than the wind law you obtained in the Emperor's tomb. Once this law appears, it can create a void space. Practitioners who have grasped the void law will be like fish in water, while other practitioners will be like a swamp. Furthermore, practitioners who have grasped the void law can escape into the natural void at any time, and not in the real world. Practitioners who have grasped the void law will be very difficult to kill. Xiao Hei continued. So powerful. The immortal path technique was created by Xiao Yu. Doesn't that mean that Xiao Yu has grasped the void law? Zhuowen asked in surprise. Xiao Hei shook her head and said, the void law contained in the immortal path technique is very weak. It's almost negligible. Xiao Yu must have only grasped the surface. Otherwise, the void law would not be so weak. Moreover, Xiao Yu created the immortal Tao technique after reading the Void Heart Sutra. I'm afraid that the Void Heart Sutra contains the true law of the void. This is one of the strongest laws among all the laws. If you can comprehend the Void Immortal Sutra, you might be able to master the law of the void. At this point, Xiao Hei looked quite excited. Isn't it too early for you to be happy? The Void Immortal Sutra has been on Ao Yuan Peak for so many years, and no one has managed to comprehend it. Obviously, it will be hundreds or thousands of times more difficult to comprehend, Zhuowen said very rationally. Looking at Zhuowen's calm appearance, Xiao Hei nodded and said, the void law is very powerful. If a practitioner does not have great luck and perseverance, it will be very difficult to grasp it. This should be the reason why no one has managed to comprehend the Void Immortal Sutra. Now, the Void Immortal Sutra is still a little far away from you. However, you can slowly cultivate and comprehend the Immortal Path technique. After all, it contains a trace of the void law. If you master the Immortal Path technique, it will be easier for you to comprehend the Void Immortal Sutra next time. Zhuowen nodded. Lu Qing had said the same thing before. To comprehend the Void Immortal Sutra, one must first master the Immortal Path technique. If one could not even master the Immortal Path technique, it meant that one was not fated to comprehend the Void Immortal Sutra. It's almost dawn. It seems that I have to go to senior sister Lu Qing to exchange for herbs. The Tai-Yin Pure Yang pill and the 9-patterned Green Spirit pill must be refined as soon as possible. Looking at the white sky outside, Zhuowen got up and opened the bamboo door. He was shocked to find that Du Shan was in the open space in front of the bamboo house, constantly practicing his immortal power. Zhuowen remembered that last night, Du Shan was greatly stimulated by him. When he entered the room, Du Shan was crazily practicing his immortal power. Now, before dawn, he saw Du Shan practicing his immortal power again. Could it be that this guy was so stimulated that he was practicing his immortal power the whole night? Thinking of this, Zhuowen shook his head. He felt a little guilty. If he had known, he would have restrained himself yesterday. He should have given Du Shan some face. However, Zhuowen also keenly noticed that the immortal power that Du Shan was using now seemed to be stronger than yesterday. Seeing this scene, the guilt in Zhuowen's heart faded a lot. It seemed that stimulation was also a kind of motivation for Du Shan. He would just treat it as doing a good deed yesterday. After casually greeting Du Shan, Zhuowen walked towards the bamboo house where Lu Qing was. Liu Qing was still seated cross-legged within the lush green bamboo. A tranquil expression hung on her face like an ancient well without ripples. Perhaps she had sensed the sound of footsteps, but her eyelids twitched. Immediately, she opened her eyes and stared at Zhuowen, who was walking over from the side. "Junior brother Zhuowen, what are you here for this time?" Lu Qing smiled gently. With a wave of her hand, she took out a bamboo chair from her spirit ring and landed in front of Zhuowen. Zhuowen sat down and said with a smile, "Yesterday, I heard from Du Shan that senior sister Lu Qing is in charge of the exchange office on Ao Yuan Peak. Senior sister is also proficient in planting spirit herbs. This time, junior brother is here to exchange for some herbs." "Oh, you need medicinal ingredients. All right, give me the list of medicinal ingredients," Lu Qing said without any hesitation. Zhuowen smiled and took out a piece of paper from his bosom. On it was written the supplementary herbs for the extreme yin pure yang pill and the 9-patterned azure spirit pill, including some extremely precious spirit herbs. 7th grade spirit herb fire lingji, 6th grade spirit herb cow nose grass, 6th grade spirit herb sunflower. After receiving the paper, Lu Qing's eyes landed on the paper. Soon after, her beautiful pupils slightly shrank. This was because many of the medicinal ingredients written on the paper were extremely precious elixirs. Among them, the fire lingji mushroom was even rarer. She really did not know what Zhuowen wanted these precious medicinal ingredients for. "Junior brother Zhuowen, I do have these herbs, but the amount of divine nether points needed is extremely large. Are you sure you have so many divine nether points on you?" Lu Qing asked suspiciously. Lu Qing had also investigated Zhuowen before, and knew that Zhuowen was a disciple who had just entered the outer court not long ago. Normally, this kind of new disciple would not have any savings on him, and with the value of the herbs that Zhuowen had given her, even the older students would find it difficult to afford them. Therefore, she was very suspicious of Zhuowen. Rubbing his nose, Zhuowen probed, "Senior sister, how many divine nether points do you need?" 1,200,000 divine nether points. Do you have that many?" Lu Qing said unhurriedly. Hiss. Zhuowen sucked in a breath of cold air. 1,200,000 divine nether points. This was indeed a bit too terrifying. One must know that Zhuowen only had 26,000 divine nether points on him. The difference was a bit too big. "Senior sister, can I exchange for something?" Zhuowen's eyes flashed as he suddenly asked. Lu Qing nodded and said, "That's possible. If you can take out something of equal value, you can use it as divine nether points to exchange for medicinal ingredients." Hearing this, Zhuowen took out a large black blade from his spirit ring and said, "This blade is called the Netherworld Blade, and is a middle-stage emperor artifact. It should be enough to exchange for these medicinal ingredients, right?" Chapter 1335. Immortal Pill Formed, Breakthrough. It is indeed a middle-tier emperor weapon. However, one is not enough. After all, the Tier 7 Fire Lingji is among the medicinal ingredients you need. Lu Qing revealed a troubled expression on her pretty face. However, this troubled expression was quickly replaced by shock. This was because she saw Zhuowen reach out once again and take out another middle-tier emperor weapon from his spirit ring. This is a middle-tier emperor weapon, Shark Fin Drill Spear. 2 middle-tier emperor weapons should be enough, right? Zhuowen spoke in a faint voice. Lu Qing received the shark fin drill spear and looked at Zhuowen with a strange expression. She did not expect that Zhuowen would be able to take out 2 middle-tier emperor weapons in one go. Moreover, his expression did not change at all. Zhuowen had gained quite a lot in the emperor tomb. He had obtained the high-tier emperor weapon, tiger head clear gold spear, 3 middle-tier emperor weapons and 5 low-tier emperor weapons from the treasure house that Mu Feng controlled back then. This underworld blade and shark fin drill spear were 2 of the 3 middle-tier emperor weapons. These 2 emperor weapons were not very useful to Zhuowen. It was naturally best if they could be used to exchange for medicinal ingredients. That's enough. Wait a moment. I will go and bring all the medicinal ingredients you need. Lu Qing kept the 2 middle-tier emperor weapons and leisurely walked back to the bamboo house. A short while later, she came out again with a few feet-long cloth bag in her hand. Waves of refreshing medicinal fragrance spread from the cloth bag, causing Zhuowen to involuntarily narrow his eyes and reveal a comfortable feeling. Junior brother Zhuowen, the medicinal ingredients you need are all here. Please check them. Lu Qing smiled and handed the cloth bag to Zhuowen. The latter naturally received it without any hesitation. He checked them and smiled, that's right. Many thanks to senior sister Lu Qing. It's nothing. Lu Qing waved her hand and said. Zhuowen nodded. After chatting for a while, he got up and bid farewell. He hurriedly returned to his residence. He was planning to use these medicinal ingredients to see if Cheng Huang could successfully refine an immortal pill. After returning to his room, Zhuowen locked the door and windows and set up a yuan formation to shield the room. Soon after, he summoned the Fushi cauldron. Cheng Huang naturally rode on the divine turtle and swaggered out of the cauldron. Little Huang, I have already collected the supplementary medicinal ingredients for the extreme yin pure yang pill and 9-rune green spirit pill. I think you can refine an immortal pill. Cheng Huang jumped down from the turtle's back and landed the medicinal ingredients. However, they did not fall. By Cheng. Cheng Huang checked carefully and said with satisfaction, all the medicinal ingredients are gathered. You can indeed refine an immortal pill. However, Zhuowen, I need to borrow your immortal power during the refining process. So, you can't drop the ball halfway. Otherwise, all my efforts will be in vain. Refining an immortal pill required immortal power. Cheng Huang was only the artifact spirit of the Fushi cauldron, so it did not have any immortal power. Therefore, to refine an immortal pill, it naturally needed Zhuowen's immortal power. Of course. Zhuowen nodded seriously. Let's begin. Zhuowen, channel your immortal power into the Fushi cauldron. Leave the refining to me. As soon as Cheng Huang said this, Zhuowen gently patted his right hand. Soon after, an endless stream of immortal power poured into the Fushi cauldron. Instantly, the surface of the Fushi cauldron began to emit a blazing light. At the same time, Zhuowen summoned the 9 flames of karmic fire. Under Cheng Huang's instructions, it landed at the bottom of the Fushi cauldron and burned intensely. When the temperature of the Fushi cauldron's surface reached its peak, Cheng Huang waved its claws and began to place the medicinal ingredients on the ground into the cauldron one by one. It seemed disorderly, but in fact, there was a certain pattern to it. Then, wisps of medicinal fragrance began to waft through the air. It refreshed the heart and refreshed the mind. Start increasing the firepower. Cheng Huang instructed Zhuowen after placing all the supplementary medicinal ingredients into the cauldron. Zhuowen naturally did as he was told. The 9 flames of karmic fire instantly burned brighter. 9 different colors flickered mysteriously in the dim room. The temperature of the Fushi cauldron's surface rose higher and higher. The flames grew fiercer and fiercer, and the medicinal fragrance grew stronger. The supplementary ingredients need to be burned for 3 days. After saying this, Cheng Huang lay down on the divine turtle's back and dozed off. This guy, looking at the snoring Cheng Huang, Zhuowen was speechless. This mongrel fox was really relaxed. He had painstakingly controlled the 9 flames of karmic fire, but this guy just said a few words and dozed off. Zhuowen immediately felt that it was unfair. Time passed minute by minute, and 3 days had passed. The temperature in the room had reached its peak. The surface of the Fushi cauldron showed signs of turning red, and the medicinal fragrance permeated the room. If Zhuowen hadn't set up a concealment origin formation in the room, the medicinal fragrance would have attracted Du Shan, who was in another room, over. However, Zhuowen discovered that although his celestial force was greatly consumed during the process of refining pills, he discovered that he was gradually becoming more and more proficient in the use of celestial force. In fact, he was even starting to become more proficient in the use of celestial force. Kid, during the process of refining pills, you can use the Bai Fang's method of tempering immortal power. It'll be quite beneficial for improving the quality of your immortal power. Cheng Huang stretched lazily and stared at Zhuowen, who was gritting his teeth, and said flatly. Upon hearing this, Zhuowen was startled at first. Then, he began to temper his immortal power skeptically. He discovered that the efficiency of tempering immortal power was much faster than before. It's really effective. After tasting the sweetness, Zhuowen tirelessly began to temper his immortal power. Feeling the immortal power in his body constantly increasing in purity, Zhuowen could not help but smile. He discovered that if he continued to temper his immortal power at this speed, it would not be long before the immortal power in his body could be tempered to middle-grade immortal power. Kid. It's time to take out the main ingredients, the flesh of the lunar golden crow and the nine-tailed centipede. Watch how I refine 2 immortal pills at the same time and broaden your horizons, Cheng Huang suddenly said heroically. Zhuowen shrugged. With a flick of his finger, he took out the corpses of the lunar golden crow and the nine-tailed centipede. He had to admit that these 2 wild beasts were indeed 8th-grade wild beasts. Even though they were dead, their flesh did not decay and was full of vitality. Cheng Huang took a step forward and wrapped Zhuowen's 9 flames karmic fire around the corpses of the lunar golden crow and the nine-tailed centipede. The 9 flames karmic fire was a heavenly fire with an extremely high temperature. Even though the lunar golden crow and the nine-tailed centipede had thick skin and flesh, they would still melt at this temperature. Cheng Huang used the 9 flames karmic fire to continuously temper the flesh of the 2 wild beasts. After about a day, Cheng Huang extracted 2 drops of blood from the 2 corpses. 1 drop was blue, and the other was black. These 2 drops of blood are the essence of the lunar golden crow and the nine-tailed centipede. Each drop of blood is priceless. As Cheng Huang spoke, he carefully dripped the 2 drops of blood into the Fushi cauldron. Then, his claws formed a series of seals as he urged Zhuowen to quickly increase the fire. Just like this, another 3 days passed. The medicinal fragrance that drifted out from the Fushi cauldron had finally receded, and it was replaced by a sweet and refreshing fragrance instead. This fragrance caused one to salivate when smelling it, and it was extremely miraculous. Bang! Cheng Huang slapped the top of the Fushi cauldron. Then, 30 long and sized pills flew out from the cauldron. There were 2 types of pills. Each type had 15 pills, so there were 30 pills in total. One of the pills was ice blue, but within the ice blue, there was a trace of red. This was the extreme yin pure yang pill. The other pill was green, and there were 9 ripples on the surface of the pill. If one looked carefully, the ripples were actually the shape of the 9 wolf heads and tails of the nine-tailed centipede. However, because it was too small, it was not very clear. This was the 9-marked cyan spirit pill. Zhuowen immediately took out 2 jade bottles from his spirit ring. Then, with a point of his right hand, he placed the lunar pure yang pill and the 9-patterned green spirit pill into the 2 jade bottles. What a rich medicinal power! Are these the immortal pills? The moment the top of the Fushi cauldron was lifted, a surge of medicinal power shot up into the sky. The roof he was on began to shake violently as cracks appeared on its surface. Just the medicinal power alone was enough to cause the roof to crack. The medicinal power of these 2 pills was a little too terrifying. Looking at the immortal pills in the jade bottles, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with excitement. Then, he picked up one of the lunar pure yang pills and swallowed it. Zhuowen felt a burning sensation amidst the coldness as he roared. This feeling was very strange. After the pill entered his body, Zhuowen felt his entire body heat up. A wave of energy was born in his body and spread through his 8 extraordinary meridians. What a surging medicinal power! This medicinal power, Zhuowen only felt that his entire body was filled with vigorous energy. It was as if he had an inexhaustible amount of energy. Therefore, he rushed out of the room and began to perform fist techniques, palm techniques, leg techniques. As long as it was a cultivation technique that he had learned or seen before, he would perform it at least once. His goal was to use this method to release the energy that was born in his body. He wanted to refine that energy into his own energy in the shortest time possible. Otherwise, it would be wasted. Du Shan, who was in another room, naturally heard the commotion at Zhuowen's side. Soon after, he saw Zhuowen dancing around like a drunkard in the courtyard. His movements were as awkward as they could get. What is Zhuowen doing? Why did he suddenly become so abnormal? Is he hungry? Du Shan frowned. Just as he was about to remind him, a muffled sound came from Zhuowen's body. Then, a surge of energy came over and swept up a terrifying hurricane. This guy broke through? He broke through just by casually dancing a few times? Is this a joke? Du Shan was stunned. He wanted to cry but had no tears. No, Zhuowen must be using some kind of powerful cultivation technique. Moreover, it must be a secret technique. I must remember it. Chapter 1336. Void Stone Tablet. Half a month passed. Zhuowen spent most of his time comprehending the immortal Dao technique after breaking through to the third-level Emperor realm. He also went down to the bottom of the 9 peaks to deliver the extreme Yin Pure Yang elixir and 9-marked green spirit elixir to Moyan Wushang, Gatha, and the others. The 2 immortal elixirs were extremely useful for low-level emperors. Zhuowen believed that with the help of the immortal elixirs, Moyan Wushang and the others would be able to advance by leaps and bounds. They would definitely be able to pass the core disciple selection and enter the 9 peaks. On this day, Zhuowen was still sitting cross-legged in his room, trying to comprehend the immortal Dao scripture. His mind was immersed in the endless void. After half a month of comprehension, the number of qi blades that surged out from the void world of the scroll had increased. Zhuowen was killed instantly when he first entered the scroll. Now, he could borrow the power of the void to dodge the qi blades. Although his movements were a little stiff, he was able to dodge them. Zhuowen was also getting better at using the power of the void. Whoosh! In the void, a qi blade appeared a few inches behind Zhuowen. The qi blade was silent and ordinary people would not be able to detect it. Zhuowen, on the other hand, remained calm and unhurried. He took a step forward and disappeared from where he stood, causing the air blade to miss. When Zhuowen's figure reappeared, he was already dozens of meters to the left. Just now, he had entered the void and dodged the air blade. However, the power of the void was very weak. He could only move 10 meters in the void. Those who had truly mastered the laws of the void could travel thousands of miles. It was extremely terrifying. The laws of the void should not only be used for escaping. It should also be used for attacking. Everything had 2 sides. If it was used well, it could be used to attack and defend. Zhuowen had been diligently studying the power of the void in the immortal Dao technique for half a month. However, he discovered that the power of the void was only used for escaping. This was a cultivation technique created by Xiaoyu after comprehending the void immortal scripture. Obviously, Xiaoyu thought that the laws of the void were only used for escaping. He blindly used the power of the void to increase his speed. In the scroll of the immortal Dao technique, these air blades were actually used to force the cultivator to use the power of the void to escape while cultivating. If one could successfully dodge the countless air blades, then they would have completely grasped the immortal Dao technique. What if I use the power of the void to attack? Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. With 2 whooshing sounds, 2 more qi blades passed through the void and instantly swept in front of Zhuowen. Their speed soared to the extreme. Zhuowen's expression did not change. He grabbed the void in front of him with his right hand and a trace of weak power of the void emerged. Suddenly, the void in front of him shattered and the qi blade in front of him was annihilated in the collapsed void. Using the power of the void to collapse the void can create such a powerful attack. However, the consumption is a little high. Zhuowen frowned slightly and murmured in a low voice. When Zhuoan entered the scroll with his mind and constantly tried to create an attack method with the power of the void, the entire Ao Yuan Peak began to tremble slightly. In the center of the platform of Ao Yuan Peak, there was a row of large wooden houses. In the courtyard behind the wooden houses, there stood a bumpy stone. At first glance, it looked like a meteorite falling from the sky. What was even more strange was that half of the meteorite was hidden in the void and the other half was standing in the courtyard. It was as if the void and the real were intertwined together and would never change. Around this meteorite, there were 3 figures sitting cross-legged. At this moment, the trembling of Ao Yuan Peak naturally attracted the attention of these 3 figures. The 3 of them were old men in their 60s. They slowly opened their eyes and looked surprised. One of the old men with a cold expression frowned slightly and said, "This vibration seems to be coming from the Void Stone Tablet." "What's wrong with the Void Stone Tablet?" "The Void Stone Tablet contains the Void Holy Scripture. This has never happened before. Why is it so agitated today?" Another old man with grey hair in a black robe was puzzled and asked. The 3 old men slowly stood up and looked at each other with surprise in their eyes. Rumble. Suddenly, the Void Stone Tablet trembled again. The body of the tablet that was hidden in the void and in the real world swayed as if it was trying to break free from some kind of shackle. "Something's wrong," the old man with the cold expression said. "In the inner yard, only Xiao Yu has a thorough understanding of the Void Holy Scripture. I'll ask him to get his ass over here," the old man in a black robe said and stepped directly into the large wooden house in front of the Void Stone Tablet. Then, the sound of crying and cursing came from inside. "Xiao Yu must be studying something. Wen Bai is an impatient person. It seems that Xiao Yu is going to suffer a little." The corner of the 3rd white-robed old man's mouth curled slightly when he heard the curses from within the wooden house. He revealed an arc as he softly laughed. The old man in a white robe had a dignified temperament. The old man with the cold expression on his face nodded and a look of awe appeared in his eyes. Obviously, the old man in a white robe in front of him was not simple. The interior of the wooden house became quiet after a commotion. Immediately, 2 figures walked out from within. One of them was the black-robed old man who had entered the wooden house earlier. He extended his right hand, pinched a man's ear and pulled him out. "Yo, yo, yo. Martial Uncle Wen Bai, did I offend you? Why did you disturb my research as soon as you came in? You even beat me up without saying anything. You've gone too far." The man whose ear was being pinched grimaced in pain and said indignantly, "How dare you talk back? I think you've been asking for a beating lately." The old man in a black robe named Wen Bai glared and slapped him. The man screamed and raised his hand to block the slap. Then, he was slapped and flew into the air, landing on the ground dozens of meters away. If Zhuoan saw this scene, he would have recognized that this man was the peak master of Ao Yuan Peak, Xiao Yu. Xiao Yu was a peak master and a powerful sage-to-be. However, he was like a chicken in the hands of the old man in a black robe. He could not resist at all. He really did not know how terrifying the old man in a black robe was. Okay. You two stop fooling around. Xiao Yu, come and see what's going on with the Void Stone Tablet." Suddenly, the old man in a white robe, who was standing quietly not far away, spoke. His voice was calm and peaceful, like a spring breeze. Wen Bai and Xiao Yu, who were still arguing, immediately stopped talking. He, since Martial Uncle Yang has requested it, I'll reluctantly take a look." Xiao Yu pretended to walk up to the Void Stone Tablet and squinted his eyes to examine it. Then, his gaze became serious and he said, "Was the vibration caused by the Void Stone Tablet?" The old man in a white robe nodded and said, "It was indeed caused by the Void Stone Tablet. In the entire inner yard, only you have a deep understanding of the Void Stone Tablet. Moreover, you have mastered a trace of the Void Law. You should be able to see what's going on with the Void Stone Tablet. Martial Uncle Yang, do you still remember what happened back then?" Back then, the Void Stone Tablet also had an abnormality, but it was much more intense than this time, Xiao Yu suddenly said seriously. The old man in a white robe slowly narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "You mean that what happened today is the same as what happened to Yuan Ji back then? Someone has communicated with the Void Stone Tablet." But that's impossible. If you want to communicate with the Void Stone Tablet, you have to comprehend it next to the Void Stone Tablet. Anyway, the three of us don't have this ability. You were studying in the room before, so there was no one else. Xiao Yu shook his head and said with a smile, "Martial uncle, have you forgotten about the Immortal Path technique? That's a technique that I comprehended from the Void Immortal scripture. It also contains a trace of opportunity to communicate with the Void power." "Oh, you think that someone used the Immortal Path technique to communicate with the Void Stone Tablet?" The old man in a white robe's eyes flashed. He could not help but stand up and continue. "In other words, such a disciple is on Ao Yuan Peak?" "It's very likely." Xiao Yu nodded seriously. "Are you kidding? There are only a dozen people on Ao Yuan Peak, and all of them have practiced the Immortal Path technique before. How come there isn't a disciple who can cause the Void Stone Tablet to act strangely, but now there is one?" The old man in a black robe, when by, said indifferently. Xiao Yu curled his lips and said, "Although there are few people on Ao Yuan Peak, Lu Qing is a talent. She only took half a year to master the Immortal Path technique. Maybe she suddenly comprehended something and then communicated with the Void Stone Tablet. Okay, Lu Qing is really talented. Ask her to come over and see if she can communicate with the Void Stone Tablet again." The old man in a white robe waved his hand and said with a burning gaze, "If it's really Lu Qing, she may be the second genius in hundreds of years who can comprehend the Void Immortal scripture. At that time, your Ao Yuan Peak may really rise." Xiao Yu grinned and said, "That's right. Don't you know whose disciple Lu Qing is? She can communicate with the Void Stone Tablet. Naturally, she has an inseparable connection with me." With that, Xiao Yu took out the communication jade charm and asked Lu Qing to come to the central area of Ao Yuan Peak. A short while later, Lu Qing's slender and elegant figure arrived in front of the wooden house. Soon after, she saw Xiao Yu and the three elders in front of the stone tablet. Her beautiful eyes were startled as she hurriedly bowed and said, "Lu Qing greets Master, Yang Ji, Jiang Xian and Wen Bai." At this moment, Lu Qing was extremely nervous. She naturally knew the three old men. The three old men were not ordinary. They were the three most powerful people in the inner yard and also the pillars of the inner yard. All three of them were saints. Chapter 1337. Kneel to me. The three old men had been staying around the Void Stone Tablet all year round in order to comprehend the Void Law in the Void Stone Tablet. As saints, the three old men had naturally grasped a saint inscription law and were very familiar with the power of the laws. However, it would be 1,000 times more difficult for a cultivator who had grasped the first law to comprehend the second law. This was equivalent to a person having only one brain. If one tried to do two things at the same time, one's attention would be divided. If one couldn't do two things well, the principle of comprehending two laws would be similar to this. The Void Law was one of the best and was widely recognized as the most difficult law to comprehend. Since the three old men had mastered one law, it would naturally be difficult for them to comprehend the second law. However, it wasn't like they didn't gain anything. At least, like Xiao Yu, they had mastered some tricks of the void power and their speed had increased. This was a relatively gratifying gain. "Lu Qing, were you cultivating the Immortal Path technique just now?" Yang Ji looked at Lu Qing with a smile. Lu Qing didn't understand and shook her head. "I wasn't cultivating the Immortal Path technique just now." "What does Grand Uncle Yang Ji mean?" "Oh, if it wasn't you, could it be someone else?" Yang Ji frowned slightly and asked curiously. "What is it?" Lu Qing asked curiously. Wen Bai was an impatient person. He didn't wait for Yang Ji to speak and explained the strange situation of the Void Stone Tablet. However, Lu Qing shook her head and said, "This should have nothing to do with me. Perhaps it was another disciple who communicated with the Void Stone Tablet." Xiao Yu frowned slightly and murmured in a low voice, "Among the dozen or so disciples of Ao Yuan Peak, only you, this little girl, have outstanding talent. The others are all trash to make up the numbers. How can they do such a thing?" Lu Qing's beautiful eyes flickered. She couldn't help but think of Zhuowen, who had just entered Ao Yuan Peak more than half a month ago. Could it be that Zhuowen? However, she quickly rejected this idea. Zhuowen had just entered Ao Yuan Peak. He had probably only been in contact with the immortal Dao technique for a month. How could he possibly communicate with the Void Stone Tablet? It was probably impossible for him to even master the immortal Dao technique. Why don't we gather all the disciples of Mysterious Origin Peak and let them cultivate the immortal Dao technique next to the Void Stone Tablet? Maybe we can cause the stone tablet to move again, Wenbai suddenly suggested. Yang Ji's eyes flickered as he said, "Junior brother, Wenbai's suggestion is good. Xiao Yu, you should follow his suggestion and gather the disciples of Ao Yuan Peak to practice the immortal path technique in front of the Void Stone Tablet. If we can find such a genius, he may become the second Yuan Ji in the future. At that time, he will be of great help to our inner yard. You don't need me to remind you, do you?" Xiao Yu revealed a rare serious expression. He nodded and said, "I understand now. Lu Qing, gather all the trash of Mysterious Origin Peak and ask them to come here to practice the immortal Dao technique in front of the Void Stone Tablet." The corner of Lu Qing's mouth revealed a bitter smile when he heard Xiao Yu's rude words. Due to the fact that there were very few people in Ao Yuan Peak and their talent was not very good, Xiao Yu's attitude towards the other core disciples was not very good. He often called them trash, which privately caused the dissatisfaction of many core disciples in Ao Yuan Peak. Lu Qing said and went to gather the disciples of Mysterious Origin Peak. In the dark room, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. There was a flash of light in his eyes. Just now, he had tried to use the void power to attack in the void space of the scroll. The effect was unexpectedly good. However, Zhuowen had only just started, so his control over his strength wasn't that good. He would have to train hard to correct this. If he used the power of the void to attack, his strength would be infinitely terrifying. It's time to find Chen Shui. With a smile at the corner of his mouth, Zhuowen slowly kept the scroll. Soon after, he got up and left the bamboo house. The cold poison in Mu Chenshue's body was not that easy to expel. Zhuowen had to expel the cold poison from her body every once in a while. It had been almost a month since the last time. Zhuowen naturally planned to go to Sky Capital Peak again. After leaving Mysterious Origin Peak, Zhuowen went to the White Jade Pavilion at the bottom of the 9 peaks to visit Moyan Wushang and the other 4. He found that their progress was not bad, especially Moyan Wushang and Gatha. With the help of the Lunar Pure Yang Elixir and 9 marked Green Spiritual Elixir, they had broken through to the 2nd level Emperor Realm. They were not far from the 3rd level Emperor Realm. Especially Gatha, her combat strength had impressed Zhuowen. With the Heaven's Wrath Armored Soul, an ordinary intermediate Emperor Realm expert would not be able to defeat Gatha. Zhuowen dared to say that Gatha would be the most popular person in the 9 peaks during the core disciple selection. The Canaan Armored Soul was also very terrifying. If she performed well during the selection, she might be chosen by one of the 9 peak masters. However, this was all Zhuowen's guess. He could only wait until the core disciple selection to find out. After exchanging some pleasantries in the White Jade Pavilion, Zhuowen left the bottom of the 9 peaks and walked towards Sky Capital Peak. At the entrance of Sky Capital Peak, there was a beautiful figure quietly standing there. Her beautiful eyes were staring at Zhuowen and the corners of her mouth were curled into a charming smile. When he came to Mu Chenshue's side, Zhuowen naturally held her small hand. The two of them smiled at each other and walked towards the top of Sky Capital Peak. At this moment, in front of the Void Stone Tablet on Mysterious Origin Peak, Lu Qing and a dozen people were unwillingly sitting cross-legged on the ground. "Cheer up, all of you, cultivate the immortal path technique," Xiao Yu said without any trace of politeness. He even scolded them. Hence, under the attention of Xiao Yu, Yang Ji, and the other 2, the 10+ people successively sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate the immortal path technique. Something worthy of mentioning was that nearly half of them were utterly unable to enter the empty space within the scroll. Given Xiao Yu's temper, he naturally told half of them to get lost. The remaining half sat cross-legged on the ground and silently cultivated the immortal path technique. Time slowly passed. Xiao Yu, Yang Ji, and the other two's faces turned slightly ugly. This was because although the remaining people were cultivating the Immortal Path technique, the Void Stone Tablet did not have any reaction at all. Even Lu Qing did not cause the Void Stone Tablet to move. It seems that the Void Stone Tablet has coincidentally become restless, Yang Ji whispered, slightly disappointed. The Void Immortal Scripture was not only the most powerful technique on Mysterious Origin Peak, but also the most powerful technique in the entire Inner Yard. If someone in the Inner Yard could really comprehend it, it would be a great joy for the Inner Yard. After all, successfully cultivating the Void Immortal Scripture meant mastering the law of the Void. When one's cultivation reached the Saint Realm, one's strength would be extremely powerful. In his disappointment, Xiao Yu also woke the remaining people up. Just as he was about to tell them to get lost, a simple and honest voice was heard. "Hey, why isn't Brother Zhuowen here? I clearly saw him in the room earlier." This person had thick eyebrows and big eyes, looking around. It was Du Shan, who lived under the same roof as Zhuowen. "Hey, there's still someone not here." Yang Ji's eyes shone brightly as he stared at Du Shan, who was looking around blankly. "Lu Qing, is everyone not here yet?" Xiao Yu frowned and asked. Lu Qing looked around and whispered, "There is indeed someone who is not here. However, I went to his residence earlier and did not find him. He should have gone out." "Who is it?" Xiao Yu looked around and found that there was no shortage of people. There were only so many people in Ao Yuan Peak. Although Xiao Yu did not care about the matters in the peak, he was still familiar with the faces of more than a dozen people in Ao Yuan Peak. "There is another person called Zhuowen. He just came to Ao Yuan Peak a month ago. He said that he was your new direct disciple. At that time, Master was in seclusion, so I did not inform you." Lu Qing said with a little guilt. "Zhuowen? Is it that kid?" Xiao Yu's eyes widened. He immediately thought of the young man who made a deal in the Great Desolate Forest. His heart was relieved. However, soon, a trace of doubt rose in his heart. Could it be that the abnormality of the Void Stone Tablet was related to that kid? "Xiao Yu, kid, who is Zhuowen? Why haven't I heard of him before?" Wenbai was an impatient person. He immediately asked in a rough voice. "That guy just joined Ao Yuan Peak." Xiao Yu briefly introduced Zhuowen. Naturally, he ignored the transaction of the lunar golden crow and the nine-tailed centipede's flesh. "You have such a bad temper. How could you personally accept a direct disciple? You really surprised me," Wenbai said with a little sarcasm. Seeing Wenbai's attitude, Xiao Yu was so angry that his teeth itched. However, he did not dare to make a move. After all, Wenbai was his senior. His strength was much stronger than his. "Humph. I dare to conclude that the one who caused the Void Stone Steely to act strangely was definitely that Zhuowen. That kid is a rare genius. It was my fiery eyes of truth that saw through him and accepted him as a personal disciple." Xiao Yu was a little unconvinced as he spoke big words. However, as soon as he said this, he cursed in his heart. He had accepted Zhuowen as a direct disciple because of a deal. He had not even tested whether Zhuowen had spiritual power talent or not. Now he was so confident. If Zhuowen did not have spiritual power talent, then he would be in trouble. Wenbai was a famous guy with a bad temper. If he knew that Xiao Yu was boasting and fooling him, he would be beaten up. "Huh? Really? If that Zhuowen is really a rare genius like you said, then you have done a meritorious deed. Now, quickly bring me to find that kid. I want to capture him and give it a try." Speaking up to here, Wenbai clenched his fists and sneered, "Of course, if what you said is wrong, Martial Uncle will teach you a lesson on behalf of your master." Looking at Wenbai's appearance, Xiao Yu's face turned green. He secretly scolded himself for saying too much. Wasn't this asking for trouble? Of course, Xiao Yu's expression was calm and composed as he said indifferently, "Of course. Martial Uncle, don't worry. That Zhuowen will definitely not let you down." Although he said this, Xiao Yu secretly prayed that Zhuowen would not be found. So Master is looking for Zhuowen. I remember that kid kept talking about Sky Capital Peak last night. He should be going to Sky Capital Peak now. Not far away, Dushan suddenly added with a silly smile. Chapter 1338. Xianzhong Zhuowen, you've broken through? On the steps of Capital Sky Peak, Mu Chunxue slightly raised her head. Naturally, she also noticed the aura coming from Zhuowen's body and asked in a slightly surprised voice. Zhuowen revealed a faint smile. Then, with a flick of his right hand, he took out 2 jade bottles and handed them to Mu Chunxue. He said, Chen Shui, I haven't given you a gift yet, so this is my greeting gift. What's inside? Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes revealed a trace of curiosity. Then, she reached out with her jade-like hand and grabbed the jade bottle, looking it over. Her white as jade palm contrasted with the pure white jade bottle, complementing each other and pleasing to the eye. You'll know when you open it, Zhuowen said with a smile. With a look of doubt, Mu Chunxue gently opened one of the jade bottles. Immediately, a rich medicinal fragrance burst out. Mu Chunxue's eyes revealed a strange look as she pinched out a pill. This pill was blue in color and there was a trace of red in between the blue. It was the Extreme Yin Pure Yang pill. After Mu Chunxue sized it up, she cautiously said, Is this an immortal pill? Zhuowen looked at Mu Chunxue with a bit of surprise. He never thought that she would be able to recognize that the pill in front of her was an immortal pill. It seemed like Mu Chunxue, who came from a large force, had good eyesight. Mu Chunxue took out the 9 lines azure spirit pill from the other jade bottle. Her beautiful eyes finally revealed a moved expression as she said to Zhuowen, Zhuowen, this immortal pill is extremely precious and you should need it more than me. Keep it for yourself. With that said, Mu Chunxue pushed the 2 jade bottles to Zhuowen, but she was stopped by Zhuowen. Chen Shui, don't worry. These 2 immortal pills are called the Extreme Yin Pure Yang pill and the 9 runes blue spirit pill. There are 5 pills in each jade bottle. You are now in the 5th layer Emperor realm. If you consume these 10 immortal pills, you should be able to reach the 6th layer Emperor realm. Zhuowen said in a serious voice. Yesterday, Zhuowen had only taken 1 Extreme Yin Pure Yang pill, and he had broken through from the 2nd level of the Great Emperor realm to the 3rd level of the Great Emperor realm. It was clear that this pill was extremely effective. Because Mu Chunxue was a mid-level Great Emperor, these 2 immortal pills weren't as effective for her as they were for Zhuowen, but they were still very beneficial for her cultivation. Seeing that Zhuowen was so insistent, Mu Chunxue nodded gently. Her heart was filled with sweetness. Although Zhuowen's gift was a little abrupt, she was pleasantly surprised. Walking to the peak and looking at the bustling scene of Sky Capital Peak, Zhuowen couldn't help but sigh. He couldn't help but compare it with Ao Yuan Peak in his mind. Soon after, he realized that the 2 couldn't be compared at all. The arrival of Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue naturally attracted the attention of the other core disciples in Sky Capital Peak. When their eyes fell on Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue's hands that were held together, the surrounding air seemed to freeze. Zhuowen's eyes were extremely calm when he sensed the many unfriendly gazes that gathered around him. However, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He knew that Mu Chunxue was an extremely popular character in Sky Capital Peak, and even in the entire inner yard. However, he didn't expect her popularity to exceed Zhuowen's expectations. From the unfriendly gazes around him, Zhuowen could tell that the core disciples of Sky Capital Peak probably all saw him as a love rival. Zhuowen. It seems that my situation isn't good. Zhuowen shrugged and said helplessly. It's not just bad, it's extremely bad. Mu Chunxue regained her senses and revealed a mischievous look. She looked extremely cute. Let's go to my pavilion first. You can help me expel the cold poison there. Speaking of the cold poison, Mu Chunxue's cheeks flushed red. She clearly recalled the honest meeting a month ago and a trace of shyness rose in her heart. Zhuowen nodded his head. In Sky Capital Peak, direct disciples all had their own independent pavilion, and Mu Chunxue was no exception. Moreover, Mu Chunxue's pavilion occupied an extremely large area, like a mansion. When the 2 of them arrived at the pavilion, a figure stood at the door and quietly stared at Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue. This person's figure was tall and straight, and his eyes were overflowing with sword intent, as if he was an unsheathed peerless sword. Jian Mu. Zhuoan narrowed his eyes and stared at the young man in front of him in surprise. At this moment, Jianmu naturally saw Zhuoan and Mu Chunxue holding hands. His good-looking sword-like eyebrows slightly knitted together, and his expression was somewhat unfriendly. "Senior brother Jianmu, why are you blocking my floating snow pavilion?" Mu Chunxue asked with her beautiful eyes filled with killing intent. "Junior sister Chen Shui, I'm here to spar with you today. It seems that it's a little inconvenient today." As he spoke, Jianmu's gaze fell on Zhuoan and he said with a smile, "Zhuoan, it seems that we meet again." Zhuoan nodded and also said with a smile, "Senior brother Jianmu is right. We meet again." It seems that it wasn't a coincidence that senior brother Jianmu appeared in the desolate ancient city. Jianmu smiled faintly and said, "Of course it wasn't a coincidence. However, I didn't expect that you would advance so quickly. It hasn't been long, and your cultivation has already advanced to the third layer Emperor realm. This really makes me look at you in a new light. However, you also know that the third layer Emperor realm is only below average in the inner court. With your cultivation, is it really appropriate for you to approach junior sister Chen Shui?" Zhuowen's gaze was extremely calm as he said with a faint smile, "Why isn't it appropriate?" As soon as these words came out, Jianmu's face stiffened. He wanted to say something, but he heard Mu Chunxue say with a gloomy face, "Senior brother Jianmu, if you want to cause trouble, I'll tell master." Jianmu shook his head and said, "I'm not here to cause trouble, I'm just here to confirm it. When I saw you and Zhuoan holding hands, I knew that you didn't have me in your heart. Moreover, I also know that Zhuoan has the heavenly flame. This time, I'm here to expel the cold poison in your body. Why would I cause trouble?" "Then you," Mu Chunxue said with a frown. Jianmu smiled and walked towards Zhuoan. When he arrived in front of Zhuoan, the smile on Jianmu's face became even wider. He said to Zhuoan, "Feelings can't be forced. You can make junior sister Chen Shui like you, it's your ability. However, I'm a little unwilling. Zhuoan, when your cultivation reaches the high-level Emperor realm, I'll come and challenge you. I want to see if the man that junior sister Chen Shui likes is really not ordinary." As he spoke, Jianmu slowly brushed past Zhuowen's shoulder. Under the gentle breeze, Jianmu's back seemed somewhat bleak. Turning his head and looking at Jianmu's back, Zhuoan revealed a look of surprise. He didn't expect that Jianmu would be able to face him and Mu Chunxue so calmly. He could feel that Jianmu did indeed like Mu Chunxue, and it was the kind that liked her very much. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come all the way from the inner court to find him, just to see what kind of love rival was like. However, Jianmu's straightforwardness made Zhuoan have a good impression of him. Jianmu disdained to fight with the current Zhuoan. Zhuoan was only at the third level Emperor realm, while Jianmu's cultivation had improved a step further, reaching the 8th level Emperor realm. There was a difference of 5 levels between the two, so Jianmu disdained to bully the weak. He wanted to wait for Zhuoan to reach the high-level Emperor realm before defeating him fair and square. "This is an extremely arrogant guy." Zhuoan silently evaluated Jianmu in his heart. When Jianmu disappeared from Zhuoan's sight, Zhuoan and Mu Chunxue entered the loft and began the detoxification journey again. While Zhuoan was detoxifying Mu Chunxue for the second time, 2 uninvited guests came to the entrance of the Divine Spectre realm. One of the 2 uninvited guests was a stooped, white-haired old man, and the other was a fair-faced young man. Divine Spectre realm, this old man hasn't stepped into this world for a long time. I've almost forgotten the taste of the Divine Spectre realm. The white-haired old man raised his head and took a light breath, his eyes filled with intoxication. "Sixth brother, we have an important mission in the Divine Spectre realm this time. Let's go to the inner court of the Divine Academy now," the young man beside him reminded. "Yes, let's go." The old man nodded. Then, the 2 of them turned into 2 shadows and disappeared from the entrance of the Divine Spectre realm. The 2 of them were very fast. In the blink of an eye, they arrived at the endless mountain range at the end of the Divine River in the Divine Spectre realm. There, the symbolic 9 mountain peaks of the inner court reached into the sky, like ancient pillars that supported the heavens. "The peak master of the profound underworld peak has a pretty good relationship with me. I think there shouldn't be any big problems if we ask him for someone this time. The two of them floated in front of the 9 mountain peaks. The white-haired old man took out a communication jade talisman from his spirit ring. After entering a message, he silently waited. Not long later, a figure flew out from the mountain range in front of them. It was a middle-aged man dressed in grey robes. This person's eyes were long and narrow, revealing a trace of viciousness. When the middle-aged man saw the old man and the young man floating in front of him, he was first startled. Then, he quickly rushed over and stared at the old man. Qing Lai, I didn't expect that you would actually come back to our divine spectre realm. May I know what business you have? The middle-aged man's tone was not very good, but the old man did not mind. He smiled and said, Xian Zhong, why are you treating me like an outsider? Don't tell me that you don't remember how happy we were when we roamed the 9 nether realm together. The middle-aged man frowned slightly and sighed. You don't visit a temple without a reason. You must have something to ask of me for coming to the divine spectre realm this time, right? Tell me, if I can do it, I will definitely help you. The middle-aged man felt somewhat helpless in his heart. Back then, when he was still young, the old man before him had saved his life. Therefore, he owed the old man a favor. The favor of saving his life was like a mountain, and he had no choice but to repay it. Help me investigate the young man called Zhuowen. This young man has just entered your inner court and should only be an official disciple. We need this child. The old man said concisely. You want a disciple of our inner court? The middle-aged man's eyes flickered as his expression turned somewhat ugly. Chapter 1339. Reversing black and white. If that's the case, then come with me. Xian Zhong nodded and led the two into the inner courtyard. Along the way, Xian Zhong asked the elder, what is the name of the disciple you are looking for? His name is Zhuowen. The elder replied calmly. Xian Zhong nodded when he heard this. He led the two to the bottom of the 9 peaks and began to inquire about Zhuowen. After which, he found out that Zhuowen had entered the Sky Capital Peak. Zhuowen is at the Sky Capital Peak. Let's go there and look for him, Xian Zhong said to the old man before he walked towards Sky Capital Peak. The old man and the young man naturally followed behind him silently. In the floating snow pavilion, Zhuowen slowly withdrew his hand. One could see that his hand was currently filled with black cold qi. This cold qi was so terrifying that even the air was frozen. However, Zhuowen possessed the Ice Flame Saint Talisman. With just a thought, the Ice Flame Saint Talisman on the back of his left hand produced a suction force that sucked all the cold black qi from his hands into the Ice Flame Saint Talisman. The dark cold poison was a heaven-rank cold qi and was extremely powerful. In addition, Zhuowen possessed a heavenly flame like the 9 flames karmic fire. Zhuowen knew that the energy created by combining these two heaven-rank energies would be extremely terrifying. However, there was not much dark cold poison left in the Ice Flame Saint symbol. Zhuowen knew that what he needed to do now was to extract all the cold poison from Mu Chunshue's body. He even needed to absorb the cold poison from her dantian before he could attempt to combine these two energies. Speaking of which, Zhuowen was looking forward to seeing how powerful and terrifying the energy created by the combination of these two heaven-rank energies would be. After expelling the cold poison, Mu Chunshue's entire body was drenched in sweat due to the high temperature. There was a trace of exhaustion in her beautiful eyes. Her exposed back that was as white as jade gently leaned against Zhuowen's chest, languid and powerless. Zhuowen licked his lips when he saw the beauty of the woman in front of him. His gaze turned fiery and his breathing became a little hurried. Soon after, he gently pulled Mu Chunshue into his embrace and bent down. The two of them began to passionately kiss. During this process, Mu Chunshue let out a soft and numb moan, causing a demonic fire to ignite in Zhuowen's lower abdomen. He sucked on her sweet lips even more domineeringly, while Zhuowen's hands landed on Mu Chunshue's smooth back, slowly moving up and down. Mu Chunshue stared at Zhuowen with misty eyes. She didn't resist at all, or rather, there was a trace of anticipation in her eyes. After a while, Zhuowen slightly raised his head and gently stared at the woman in front of him. He softly said, "Are you willing?" Mu Chunshue's cheeks were slightly red. She raised her chin slightly and said softly, "Didn't you say that you would marry me? You should be a man of your words. Since I will become your wife in the end, why do you still need to ask?" Zhuowen deeply stared at the woman in front of him. The demonic fire in his heart finally couldn't be suppressed and he fiercely kissed her. The dim room was filled with a charming atmosphere. Just as Zhuowen was about to take the next step, his eyes suddenly emitted a cold light. Then, Zhuowen suddenly stood up. With a wave of his right hand, he grabbed the large coat on the ground and draped it over Mu Chunxue's body. "What's wrong?" Mu Chunxue was startled. She looked at Zhuowen's actions with some astonishment and asked in puzzlement. "Someone has come to the floating snow pavilion, and they don't have good intentions," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. Just now, when he was aroused, Xiao Hei, who was keeping watch outside, transmitted a message to him. 3 people with terrifying auras were rushing towards the floating snow pavilion, and it was very likely that they didn't have good intentions. While he was being intimate with Mu Chunxue, Zhuowen naturally sent Xiao Hei and Cheng Huang out. Otherwise, how could he let the 2 of them see such an embarrassing scene? Mu Chunxue knitted her brows. Seeing Zhuowen so cautious, she also knew that there were probably people who didn't have good intentions. After simply tidying up her clothes and makeup, she followed Zhuowen out of the floating snow pavilion. In front of the floating snow pavilion, there was a square paved with white stones. The square was quite lively. Many Sky Capital Peak Core disciples were either sitting cross-legged in meditation, practicing cultivation techniques, leisurely strolling, or challenging each other. However, at this moment, many people in the square stopped what they were doing because in front of the square, 3 figures were slowly walking over. The person in the lead was a middle-aged man with a gloomy expression. Is that the peak master of the mysterious underworld peak, Martial Uncle Xianzhong? Why has Martial Uncle Xianzhong come to our Sky Capital Peak? In the square, the gazes of most of the disciples fell on the middle-aged man in the lead of the 3 figures. Many people recognized the middle-aged man's identity, but the 2 people behind Xianzhong were very unfamiliar to them. They had never seen them before. However, the auras of the 2 people were very powerful and couldn't be underestimated. Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue stood side by side, staring at Xianzhong and the other 2. The 2 of them could naturally see that Xianzhong and the other 2 were walking towards them. "You are Zhuowen?" Xianzhong walked to the front of Zhuowen and asked condescendingly. Zhuowen frowned slightly. Zhuowen subconsciously felt uncomfortable with Xianzhong's condescending attitude. However, Xianzhong was after all the peak master of one of the 9 peaks. Zhuowen couldn't offend him too much. He only nodded and said, "Yes, I am. May I know why Martial Uncle Xianzhong is looking for me? Since you are Zhuowen, come with me. I have some things that I need to confirm with you." Xianzhong said indifferently, his voice was unquestionable. "I don't seem to be Martial Uncle Xianzhong's prisoner. If you have something to say, just say it here. There's no need to beat around the bush and ask me to come with you," Zhuowen said indifferently. Xianzhong's eyes slowly narrowed, and a trace of coldness swept out. He sneered and said, "You dare to disobey my order? If I ask you to come with me, you will have to come with me." Then, Xianzhong stretched out his hand, and a surge of power of law surged out. It turned into a giant palm that enveloped Zhuowen. Hong. However, when Xianzhong's palm landed in front of Zhuowen, a golden light surged out and turned into a golden barrier. The giant palm formed by the power of law slammed into the golden barrier and stopped. It couldn't move forward at all. Xianzhong's eyes were gloomy, and his attention fell on Mu Chunxue who was beside Zhuowen. He said with some fear, "Martial niece Chen Shui, Martial Uncle Xian is doing something. Do you want to meddle in other people's business?" At this moment, Mu Chunxue was holding a golden feather in her hand. The feather revealed a soul-shaking pressure. The pressure was far stronger than that of an ordinary martial emperor. Moreover, the feather could block Xianzhong's palm formed by the power of law. It was extraordinary. A saint tool? Zhuowen stared at the golden feather in Mu Chunxue's hand with some surprise. The pressure of the feather was similar to the aura of the heavenless sword he had used before. However, It seemed to be much weaker than the Heavenless Sword's aura. It's not a saint tool. It should be a defective saint tool. Although it can't be compared to a saint tool, it's much stronger than a high-grade martial emperor tool. Xianzhong is a half-step martial saint. This defective saint tool is more than enough to block Xianzhong. Xiao Hei's voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. So it's a defective item. Zhuowen nodded, but he was envious in his heart. Mu Chunxue was worthy of being the saintess of a great force like the Burning Heaven sect. She actually had such a powerful weapon. If Mu Chunxue's body hadn't erupted with the cold poison, Ju Xiao, Yakshaw jellyfish and Black Widow wouldn't have been a match for Mu Chunxue even if they attacked together. Mu Chunxue's beautiful eyes were extremely cold. She glanced at Xianzhong indifferently and said, "Martial Uncle Xianzhong, do you really think I don't know the origins of the two people behind you? You brought the Blue Dragon Hall's 6th and 7th Azure Dragon Envoy and asked Zhuowen to go out. Are you planning to hand over Zhuowen to the Blue Dragon Hall?" People from the Blue Dragon Hall? Zhuowen's eyes suddenly emitted a cold light. His face was ugly as he stared at Xianzhong and the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon Envoy behind him. This Xianzhong was really shameless. He actually brought people from the Blue Dragon Hall and planned to hand over an inner courtyard disciple to the Blue Dragon Hall. Many warriors in the square were also in an uproar. Originally, the surrounding Sky Capital Peak disciples didn't feel anything when Xianzhong asked Zhuowen to go out. However, when Mu Chunxue mentioned the identities of the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon Envoy, everyone began to discuss spiritedly. Xianzhong's actions were too obvious. He brought people from the Blue Dragon Hall to ask Zhuowen to go out. As long as one wasn't a fool, one could see that if Zhuowen really went out, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xianzhong's face was slightly ugly. He didn't expect that Mu Chunxue would actually recognize the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon Envoy. This made things difficult for him. "Xianzhong, what are you afraid of? To be honest, this Zhuowen is actually a descendant of the Riker. Everyone should know the rules of my Blue Dragon Hall, right? Anyone who is a descendant of the Riker will be killed. Anyone who helps a descendant of the Riker will be killed without mercy," the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy said unhurriedly. Xianzhong was stunned. Soon after, his gaze landed on Zhuowen. His expression regained its calmness as he said indifferently, "So that's how it is. You are actually a descendant of the Riker. You must have an ulterior motive for sneaking into my divine nether realm. Could it be that you want to use this opportunity to start a war between my divine nether realm and the dragon nether realm? Your intentions are extremely sinister." Hearing these words, the surrounding Sky Capital Peak Core disciples, who were originally puzzled, revealed expressions of relief. "So that's how it is. He is actually a descendant of the Riker. Looks like he must have an ulterior motive for joining my divine nether realm academy. No wonder Martial Uncle Xianzhong wanted to capture this kid. So this kid isn't anything good to begin with." Immediately, numerous discussions sounded in the square. Everyone's gazes changed when they looked at Zhuowen. Some of the more radical fellows even mocked Zhuowen. Chapter 1340. Heresy. No matter what my identity is, I am now a disciple of the inner court of the divine nether realm. Martial Uncle Xianzhong, you are helping an outsider of the Blue Dragon Hall to force an inner court disciple. Don't you feel ashamed? As for your rumor that I will cause a war between the divine nether realm and the dragon nether realm, isn't that too much nonsense? I'm just a small disciple. If I can cause a war between two great nether realms, why would I join the inner court? If Martial Uncle wants to help two outsiders capture me, just say it. There's no need to beat around the bush." Zhuowen raised his head and looked at Xianzhong, who had an ugly expression on his face, as he mocked. Xianzhong narrowed his eyes and coldly stared at Zhuowen. He grinned and said, "You're the one who's twisting the truth. Who in the Nine Nether Realm doesn't know about the grudge between the Riker descendants and the Blue Dragon Hall? You joining my divine academy is probably to seek our protection. Hey, what a good idea." After saying this, Xianzhong's attention fell onto Mu Chunxue. He said earnestly, "Martial niece Chen Shui, this child's identity is already clear, so there's no need for me to say anything more, right? Even if the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon emissaries don't come today, I will still expel this kid from the inner court of the divine nether realm. Martial Uncle Xianzhong, could it be that you alone can represent the entire inner court, or is it that your profound underworld peak has the final say in the entire inner court? You don't have the right to expel Zhuoan at all. At the very least, the 9 peak masters have to gather and make a joint decision. Suddenly, a sharp voice sounded out. Following that, a giant sword of light flew over from the horizon. Sword Intent soared into the sky and stabbed between Mu Chunxue and Xianzhong. The sword of light gradually disappeared and a young man with a long sword on his back stood in front of Mu Chunxue. His eyes were cold as he stared at Xianzhong in front of him. Jian Mu, do you also want to meddle in other people's business? Xianzhong frowned slightly and said in a displeased tone. Jian Mu shook his head and said, I am just doing my job. Regardless of Zhuoan's past identity, he is now a disciple of the Inner Academy. As a member of the Inner Academy, I will naturally not allow the people of the Dragon Wasteland to openly take someone from the Inner Academy away from our own territory. As for how to deal with Zhuoan, it's not up to you, Martial Uncle Xianzhong, to decide. At the very least, you have to consult the other 8 peak masters. Xianzhong's face gradually darkened. He grinned and said, Jian Mu, it seems that you also want to protect this Rika descendant. In that case, don't blame Martial Uncle for being merciless. Leave this fellow to me. He's also an 8th level Martial Emperor. I wonder how strong the geniuses of your inner courtyard are. The 7th Azure Dragon envoy took a step forward and chuckled. He brought along a howling hurricane and instantly swept in front of Jian Mu with a waste blade in his hand. The waste blade was curved like a crescent moon and the surface of the blade emitted a blazing white light. A strong and heavy Emperor's aura surged from the surface of the waste blade. It was obvious that the waste blade of the 7th Azure Dragon envoy was a high-grade Emperor weapon. Jian Mu snorted coldly and formed a sword seal with his right hand. Then, the long sword on his back was unsheathed and held in his hand. He flicked the long sword upwards and a crescent moon-like sword chi soared into the sky. Clang! The sword chi blasted on the waste blade. The 7th Azure Dragon envoy's face changed slightly when he discovered that the sword chi was extremely powerful. He couldn't help but retreat continuously. So strong. Zhuoan narrowed his eyes as he stared at Jian Mu, who had repelled the 7th Azure Dragon envoy with a single sword strike. He was amazed. Back in the desolate ancient city, he already felt that Jian Mu was extraordinary. At that time, Jian Mu was only a 7th level martial emperor. Now that a year had passed, Jian Mu had also successfully advanced to the 8th level martial emperor realm. The battle strength that he displayed was so terrifying that the 7th Azure Dragon envoy, who was also an 8th level martial emperor, could only retreat continuously under his sword strike. Let me deal with this guy. Old 7, you go and capture Zhuoan. As for brother Xianzhong, I'll leave the little girl to you. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy faintly said as he leaped into the air. A terrifying force erupted as a series of explosive sounds rang out in the air. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy's aura was much stronger than the 7th Azure Dragon envoy's because the 7th Azure Dragon envoy was a genuine 9th level martial emperor. Although he hadn't comprehended the power of law and become an invincible martial emperor, he was very close to becoming a half-saint. As the peak master of the profound underworld peak, Xianzhong naturally had the cultivation of a half-saint. When he was young, the 6th Azure Dragon envoy was older than him and his cultivation was also higher. By chance, he was saved by the 6th Azure Dragon envoy. Later, as time passed, Xianzhong's talent was also revealed. His cultivation slowly caught up and eventually surpassed the 6th Azure Dragon envoy to become a half-saint. He also became the peak master of the profound underworld peak. If it wasn't for the kindness in the past, Xianzhong wouldn't have helped the 6th Azure Dragon envoy. However, he had no choice but to do so now. After all, the path of martial Dao was about the Dao heart. If one's Dao heart wasn't stable, it would be a great hindrance to the next realm. This was Xianzhong's mentality. If he didn't repay the kindness of the 6th Azure Dragon emissary for saving his life, His Dao heart would definitely be flawed, which would be harmful to his future path of martial arts. This was also the reason why he wholeheartedly helped the 6th Azure Dragon emissary. Boom. Boom. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy took a step forward and pressed down with his right hand. His palm began to be covered by azure scales and his body was filled with endless dragon roars. At this moment, it was as if he had turned into a huge azure dragon. Jianmu frowned slightly and a cautious look appeared in his eyes. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy was much stronger than the 7th Azure Dragon envoy. However, Jianmu still only had one sword. It soared into the sky and turned into a huge sword of light that stretched across the horizon. Bang! The light sword and the dragon claw of the 6th Azure Dragon emissary clashed together, creating a terrifying energy ripple. Explosions that sounded like fireworks exploded in the air, continuously and majestically. Slash! Jianmu leaped up and countless sword shadows surged out from under his feet. These sword shadows swept out from under his feet as if they were carrying Jianmu towards the sky. In the sky, Jianmu gently inhaled a breath of air. His right hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. Immediately, he slashed out horizontally. An arc-shaped sword glow spread out, sweeping through the surrounding space and instantly arriving in front of the 6th Green Dragon envoy. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy snorted coldly and stretched out his empty left hand. The surface of his left hand was covered with azure scales and looked as tough as azure stones. Boom! 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 The two instantly collided and immediately engaged in a great battle. The terrifying shockwaves spread out and many disciples in the square were shocked. Zhuo Wen narrowed his eyes. Jianmu was indeed powerful. He was only at the 8th level of the Great Emperor realm, but he was able to fight evenly with the 6th Azure Dragon envoy who was at the 9th level of the Great Emperor realm. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy couldn't even do anything to Jianmu. After all, in the Emperor realm, once one reached the Advanced Emperor realm, the difference in strength between each level was huge. It was normally very difficult for an 8th level of the Emperor realm to fight against a 9th level of the Emperor realm, but Jianmu did it easily. Moreover, Zhuo sharply noticed that Jianmu probably hadn't used his full strength. This was his intuition. Senior Xianzhong, I think we should do what we need to do. The 7th Azure Dragon envoy glanced at Jianmu with fear and then said to Xianzhong who was beside him. Now, the 7th Azure Dragon envoy had a belly full of anger. He was defeated by Jianmu who was at the same level as him in one move. This was a great humiliation to him, but he didn't dare to provoke Jianmu again. He knew very well that he was inferior. Now, he only wanted to experience the thrill of oppressing others. Unfortunately, the person he chose to oppress was Zhuo. Xianzhong nodded and glanced at Mu Chenxue. He said, "Martial niece Mu Chenxue, this isn't a real saint weapon. It will be very difficult for you to stop me." As he spoke, Xianzhong took a step forward and stretched out his right hand. A strange ink-black energy swept out from his palm. This energy contained an extremely terrifying power of law. Boom! The moment this black energy slammed into the golden barrier that Mu Chenxue had created with the golden feather, it produced an extremely strange corrosive power. There was a hissing sound of corrosion at the place where the two collided, and wisps of white smoke rose. I have grasped the law of mysterious underworld. This is mysterious underworld chi from the 9 underworlds. It is extremely corrosive. If it isn't a saint weapon, it won't be able to stop it at all. Xianzhong's eyes were indifferent. He clenched his right hand and the black energy turned into a giant hand that was several feet long. It slammed heavily onto the golden barrier. The corrosive and offensive powers collided, and the golden barrier collapsed. Deng deng deng. Mu Chenxue's face was pale as she took a few steps back. However, Zhuo beside her took a step forward and placed his right hand on her back, stopping her from retreating. "Chen Shui, are you all right?" Zhuo asked in a worried voice. Mu Chenxue gently shook her head and said, "Zhuo, quickly go to the star-picking pavilion where my master is. This Xianzhong has already gone crazy. He actually brought the Blue Dragon Hall to my Sky Capital Peak to capture you. He really doesn't put the Sky Capital Peak in his eyes." Zhuo nodded and hugged her. Purple lightning wings that were 10 feet long appeared on his back. With a rumbling sound, he turned into a purple bolt of lightning and disappeared on the spot. Want to leave? Xianzhong had his hands behind his back as he took a step forward. He instantly blocked in front of Zhuowen. Waves of mysterious underworld energy surged out and turned into countless black tentacles. They swept towards Zhuowen and sealed off all directions. This black energy contains the law of mysterious underworld with strong corrosive power. I can't let Chen Shui come into contact with it. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He clapped his right hand and a force pushed Mu Chenxue to the ground behind him. Zhuowen's eyes were blurred. He waved his right hand and celestial power surged out from his body. He waved his hand in the air and instantly, Zhuowen disappeared from the void. Boom boom boom. Countless waves of mysterious underworld energy swept over, but they all missed because Zhuowen, who was originally standing on the spot, had disappeared without a trace. Where is he? Xianzhong was stunned. He turned his head and instantly saw a figure walking out of the void tens of meters away. It was Zhuowen. Chapter 1341. Killing Intent Immortal Dao Technique? How do you know Ao Yuan Peak's technique? Looking at Zhuowen, who appeared a few dozen meters away, Xianzhong's eyes flashed as he asked in surprise. Martial Uncle Xianzhong, I advise you not to act recklessly. Zhuowen is not just an official disciple of the Inner Yard. He has been accepted as a lineal disciple by Martial Uncle Xiao Yu. Are you still going to help the 2 Blue Dragon ambassadors capture Zhuowen? Mu Chenxue said angrily. As a senior expert of the Inner Yard, not only did Xianzhong not protect the interests of the Inner Yard disciples, but he also helped the people of the Blue Dragon Hall to capture Zhuowen. This action was too much. He has been accepted as a lineal disciple by Xiao Yu? Xianzhong whispered in surprise. Zhuowen slowly turned around and stared indifferently at the alarmed Xianzhong in front of him. This Xianzhong was taking advantage of his seniority and actually dared to openly capture him in the Inner Academy. He was simply overbearing and rampant. So what if he is Xiao Yu? He is a Rika spy. If he is allowed to stay in the Inner Yard, he will become a big threat. It is better to hand him over to the Blue Dragon Hall as soon as possible to prevent future troubles. Xianzhong's eyes revealed a trace of ruthlessness. He had already taken action. If he stopped now, he would undoubtedly become a laughingstock. Hence, Xianzhong had to capture Zhuowen this time. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. With that, Xianzhong stretched out his right hand again. Thousands of black tentacles swept out from the surrounding space. The corrosive power seemed to be omnipresent and sealed the space around Zhuowen. Zhuowen's expression changed drastically as void energy burst out from his surroundings, forming a circular protective layer around him. The black tentacles that were rushing towards him slammed into the protective layer formed by the void energy and seemed to enter a bottomless pit, unable to touch Zhuowen's body at all. The immortal Dao technique can form a defense. Xianzhong frowned slightly. In his impression, the immortal Dao technique of Ao Yuan Peak should only be able to use the void power to escape. Since when did it use the void power to form a defense like Zhuowen? Annihilation. Zhuowen softly exhaled. The space dozens of feet around him immediately collapsed and shattered. The black tentacles that were about to make contact with Zhuowen actually came to a complete stop within the shattered space. They did not move at all. What? He can even use the power of the void to attack. How did he do it? Xianzhong was truly shocked. Whether it was attacking or defending, Zhuowen had comprehended them last night. However, he was not very proficient in using them. His technique was rather rusty, and it was very difficult for him to block Xianzhong's attack. Moreover, Zhuowen knew that Xianzhong hadn't used his full strength. Xianzhong was a semi-sage expert. So, Xianzhong would have been crushed to death even if he had used his full strength. Xianzhong wouldn't have been lucky if he had used his full strength. It seems you are not simple. However, the gap between you and me is too big. I will let you know how strong a half-step sage is. Xianzhong's gaze became serious. He immediately clenched his right hand, and the surrounding black tentacles unexpectedly exploded continuously with a rumbling sound. The defense formed by the shattered space around Zhuowen couldn't withstand a single blow, and was directly shattered. Zhuowen groaned, and retreated continuously. A trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. A half-step sage was too terrifying. It was difficult for Zhuowen to resist such a simple attack. He knew that even if he used all his trump cards, he wouldn't be a match for Xianzhong. Of course, if he still had Emperor Wu Tian's sword, he might be able to resist Xianzhong. Unfortunately, Emperor Wu Tian's sword's 2 chances had been used up, and now it was completely scrapped. "Xianzhong! You bastard, stop it!" A shocking shout came from afar. Immediately, a middle-aged man with disheveled hair in a loose robe rushed over. His gaze fell on Xianzhong, and he quickly shouted, "Xiao Yu, and Martial Uncle Wenbai?" Xianzhong turned his head and immediately recognized the man with disheveled hair. Wasn't he the peak master of Ao Yuan Peak, Xiao Yu? However, Xianzhong was most concerned about the black-robed elder behind Xiao Yu. The elder was a highly respected and powerful senior in the entire inner yard. His cultivation was in the Saint realm, and he was one of the pillars of the inner yard. Xianzhong was puzzled that someone like Wenbai actually came with Xiao Yu. Was it all because of this guy? Thinking of this, Xianzhong's gaze fell on Zhuowen, who was retreating under the attack of the black tentacles. His expression was uncertain. Mu Chunxue also saw Xiao Yu and Wenbai rushing over, and she heaved a sigh of relief. She knew that once Xiao Yu came, Xianzhong wouldn't dare to act rashly. Especially since Xiao Yu was followed by Wenbai, an expert of the older generation, Mu Chunxue was more relieved. "Xianzhong, directly kill Zhuowen. After this, my Azure Dragon Hall's Palace Master will give you a suitable reward. Moreover, you've already made a move against this kid. This kid will definitely harbor a grudge in his heart in the future. If you don't get rid of him by the roots, I'm afraid he'll become quite a threat to you in the future." Just as Xianzhong was hesitating, the voice of the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy, who was fighting fiercely with Jian Mu, suddenly rang out in Xianzhong's mind. Xianzhong slowly narrowed his eyes. "Kill." Xianzhong bellowed and made a prompt decision. He decided to completely kill Zhuowen. He was one of the 9 peak masters, and his status was much higher than Zhuowen's. He believed that even if he killed Zhuowen now, he would at most be scolded by the 3 martial uncles of the inner yard. They wouldn't really do anything to him. If he didn't kill him, Zhuowen would probably bear a grudge against him, and he would probably bear a grudge in the future. At that time, if he was stabbed in the back, the loss would outweigh the gain. "Bastard!" Looking at Xianzhong, who was advancing instead of retreating, Zhuowen cursed in a low voice. He continuously executed the Immortal Path technique and escaped into the void. At the same time, the purple lightning wings on his back flapped continuously, and his speed soared to the extreme. Mu Chunxue's face changed drastically. She wanted to help, but Xianzhong and Zhuowen's speed was too fast. In her current state, it was really difficult for her to catch up with the two of them. Mu Chunxue gritted her teeth and waved her jade-like hand. Immediately, the golden feather in her hand flew out, turned into a golden light, and blasted towards Xianzhong's back. The golden light that was like the sun spread out, and the feather began to expand continuously. In the end, it became a few hundred feet long, like a golden mountain. It crushed down from the void, and heavily smashed onto Xianzhong's head. Xianzhong frowned slightly. He stomped his foot, and the mysterious underworld energy that contained the lore of mysterious underworld turned into a black sharp sword. It soared into the sky, and slashed the surface of the golden feather. With a clang, the golden feather was directly cut into 2 by the sharp sword formed by the lore of mysterious underworld. "You can't save him." Xianzhong snorted coldly. Even though Zhuowen relied on the Immortal Path technique's void power and purple lightning wings to increase his speed to the extreme, the difference between their realms was too big. Even though Xianzhong wasn't good at speed, he still easily caught up with Zhuowen. At this moment, Xianzhong looked down at Zhuowen, as if he was looking at an insignificant ant. He said flatly, "Zhuowen, you can only blame yourself for not knowing how to appreciate kindness. If you had followed us before, you could still have kept your life. Unfortunately, you rejected us. Now, I can only kill you. Don't blame me when you go to hell." After speaking, Xianzhong raised his right hand and gently placed it on his palm. This palm contained the terrifying law of mysterious underworld. Waves of black cold air, like a storm, enveloped Zhuowen, and the bone-chilling cold almost covered Zhuowen's entire body. Boom! Xianzhong's palm landed heavily on Zhuowen's chest. Then, he realized that there was something hard on Zhuowen's chest that blocked his palm attack. Then, Xianzhong realized that a purple gas had spread from his palm to his entire right arm. Rip! Under the powerful palm attack, Zhuowen's outer clothes were torn apart, revealing the purple-black inner armor hidden under his clothes. This inner armor was the Divine Thorn's armor that Zhuowen had obtained from the Azure Dragon Palace. The Divine Thorn's armor was a high-grade defensive emperor weapon. Its defensive power was extremely strong, and it also contained a powerful poison. This poison was so strong that even a high-level emperor would be in trouble if infected. Poochie. Xianzhong was too fast. He was so fast that Zhuowen didn't even have time to react. Fortunately, he had the armor of thorns to protect him. Even so, Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow. Even with the protection of the Divine Thorn's armor, it was difficult for him to withstand the attack of a half-step saint. Moreover, Zhuowen was shocked to see that cracks began to appear on the surface of the Divine Thorn's armor. These cracks began to spread, and finally, the Divine Thorn's armor that protected him shattered. Poison? You have a high-grade defensive emperor weapon? Xianzhong frowned slightly. He looked with slight surprise at the young man who retreated repeatedly and had an extremely weak aura. Especially the poison on the divine bramble armor. It was like a maggot that coiled around the young man's palm and intended to enter his body. I didn't expect you to have such a defensive emperor weapon. However, you're still going to die today. Xianzhong clenched his right fist and the poisonous gas that had lingered in his palm was immediately dispersed. He was a half-sage, so the thorny divine armor's poison didn't have much of an effect on him. At most, it would cause him some trouble. After dealing with the poison in his palm, Xianzhong snorted coldly. He took a step forward and caught up with Zhuowen again. His right palm struck out again, and the hurricane caused by the law of mysterious underworld swept across the entire space. Xianzhong, did you take my words for granted? F*CKU. Just as Xianzhong's palm was about to reach Zhuowen, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Zhuowen and struck out with his palm as well. Powerful flames burst out from the palm, and the flames contained the law of mysterious underworld. Obviously, this person had mastered the law of fire, and had the ability to control powerful flames. Boom. Chapter 1342. Palace Master Xiao Yu took a few steps back with an ugly expression on his face. After receiving Dushan's reminder, Wenbai hurriedly dragged him to Sky Capital Peak in order to find Zhuowen and see if he could trigger a reaction from the Void Immortal Scripture. After arriving at Sky Capital Peak, they saw Xianzhong going crazy for some reason. He was actually trying to deal with Zhuowen. Although the reason why Xiao Yu had taken Zhuowen as his personal disciple was mostly because of a transaction, Zhuowen was still his personal disciple. Even if it was in name, there was still a deep relationship between him and Xiao Yu. Xianzhong, the peak master of mysterious underworld peak, was trying to kill Jian Wushuang in front of him, even when he shouted for him to stop. This showed that he didn't put him in his eyes. Therefore, Xiao Yu was furious and the consequences were serious. Xianzhong, Zhuowen is my new personal disciple. You want to kill him in front of me. Do you think that my mysterious underworld peak has no one? Xiao Yu's voice was extremely cold. On the other side, the battle between the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy and Jian Mu was also separated. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy landed beside Xianzhong, while Jian Mu came to Mu Chunxue's side and asked with concern, "Junior Sister Chunxue, are you alright?" Mu Chunxue shook her head. With a step, she came to Zhuowen's side. Looking at the blood at the corner of his mouth and his pale face, her eyes were filled with worry. Jian Mu's face stiffened. Seeing Mu Chunxue so concerned about Zhuowen, His eyes revealed a trace of sadness. He just quietly looked at Zhuowen and Mu Chunxue. "I'm fine." Zhuowen waved his hand and forced a smile. "Zhuowen, take this. This pill can temporarily suppress the injuries in your body." Mu Chunxue was still a little worried. She took out a pill from her spirit ring and considerately put it into Zhuowen's mouth. Zhuowen did not refuse and swallowed it directly. Soon after, he felt a warm current spread out from the elixir. It flowed through his 8 extraordinary meridians and circulated around his entire body, causing him to feel warm and indescribably comfortable. A portion of the injuries caused by Xian Zhong had actually recovered. "Chen Shui, what kind of pill is this? It's actually this amazing?" Zhuowen's eyes lit up as he asked. "Qi Nourishing Pill, a low-grade immortal pill. It has an extremely significant effect on injuries," Mu Chunxue replied softly. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Mu Chunxue's identity was not ordinary, so he was not very surprised that she had celestial pills. At this moment, Xian Zhong, who was originally confronting Xiaoyu, frowned slightly and coldly snorted, "Xiaoyu, I didn't know that this child was your mysterious Origin Peak's disciple. What do you mean by questioning me?" After saying this, Xian Zhong turned to Wen Bai behind Xiaoyu and respectfully said, "Martial Uncle Wen, why have you come to Sky Capital Peak? Why don't you come to our mysterious underworld peak? Xian Zhong can be a good host." Wen Bai's face was also not very good. He coldly said, "Who allowed you to touch Zhuowen? Also, these two are from the Blue Dragon Hall, right? Why did you bring these two guys into the inner courtyard?" Xian Zhong's face stiffened. He could feel that Wen Bai's attitude towards him was not very friendly. Could it be because of Zhuowen? He. Greetings to Peak Master Xiaoyu and Senior Wen Bai. This time, Xian Zhong came to Sky Capital Peak for the sake of the inner courtyard. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy spoke. He pointed at Zhuowen with his right hand and continued, "This child is a descendant of Rika and has an inseparable relationship with our Blue Dragon Hall. I think the two of you should know better than me what the relationship between Rika and Blue Dragon Hall is, right? Therefore, I'm afraid that this child's purpose in entering the inner courtyard is not very pure. I hope the two of you can give face to our Blue Dragon Hall and let us deal with this kid. After this, our Blue Dragon Hall will definitely compensate your inner courtyard well." The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's attitude was rather humble. It could be said that he had given Xiaoyu and Wen Bai enough face. In the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's opinion, Xiaoyu and Wen Bai shouldn't offend the Azure Dragon Palace for a mere Zhuowen. However, the moment the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy raised his head, a slap was suddenly thrown over and landed heavily on his cheek. A crisp sound of a slap resounded. Then, before the crowd's gazes, the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy was heavily smashed onto the ground with a dog-eating feces posture. His right cheek was extremely swollen. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy was stunned. He held his cheek and raised his head to stare at Xiaoyu. His eyes were almost spitting fire. Xiaoyu had actually slapped him without any warning. This slap had almost caused him to cover his face. Originally, with the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's strength at the 9th level of the Martial Emperor realm, if he had been vigilant, he would have been able to dodge this slap. However, Xiaoyu was known as Madman Xiao in the inner courtyard. Normally, he would not play by the rules. Just now, Xiaoyu had directly slapped the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy's face when he was speaking. This slap had directly stunned the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy. "To give face to your mother, you swaggered into our inner courtyard and attacked our inner courtyard disciples without any scruples. Do you think this is your Blue Dragon Hall? Also, do you think we are 3-year-old children? If we give face to you, who will give face to us?" Just as the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy raised his head and fell to the ground, Xiaoyu suddenly descended and ruthlessly stomped on his chest. The power of law gushed out and directly suppressed the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy, causing him to be unable to get up. The 6th Azure Dragon Envoy roared fiercely. The power in his body surged out in an attempt to blast Xiaoyu away. However, Xiaoyu was a sage to be. The power of the law of fire on his body was very terrifying. It firmly suppressed the 6th Azure Dragon Envoy, causing him to be unable to get up. Still want to resist? I'll teach you to resist, I'll teach you to resist. As he said that, Xiao Yu stomped down again and again. Every stomp landed on the 6th Azure Dragon emissary's head, and he purposely made the 6th Azure Dragon emissary face down. His posture was extremely humiliating. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy roared furiously and struggled with all his might. However, it was useless. His strength was much weaker than Xiao Yu's. Xiao Yu, enough. The corner of Xian Zhong's mouth twitched slightly when he saw this scene. Immediately, he let out a low cry. The 6th Green Dragon envoy had once saved him and was his benefactor. Now, Xiao Yu was actually trampling on the 6th Green Dragon envoy because of a mere inner academy disciple. This was equivalent to slapping his face. Martial Uncle Xian Zhong, I want to ask you right now. Are you a member of the Blue Dragon Hall or the Divine Academy? If you were a member of the Blue Dragon Hall, it would naturally be pardonable for you to speak up for the 6th Azure Dragon envoy. However, you're not a member of the Blue Dragon Hall, yet you speak up for someone from the Blue Dragon Hall. Doesn't that mean? Haha, I think you know what I mean. Zhuowen's complexion had improved a lot after eating the pill given by Mu Chenxue. He looked at Xian Zhong with slight mockery. Who do you think you are? Do you have the right to interrupt us when we're talking? Xian Zhong turned his head. His eyes narrowed dangerously. He suddenly extended his right hand. The law of underworld shot out, turning into black tentacles that swept towards Zhuowen. He had actually attacked Zhuowen without any warning. Martial Uncle Xian Zhong, you've gone too far. Mu Chenxue's beautiful eyes were still filled with coldness. Her right hand gently landed on the spiritual ring, as if she wanted to take out something. Zhuo Wen's expression had become extremely ugly. This Xian Zhong had attacked without the slightest bit of mercy, and it was obvious that he wanted to kill Zhuo Wen. This caused Zhuo Wen's heart to feel cold. However, Xian Zhong's attack did not land. A tall figure stood in front of Zhuowen and Mu Chenxue. The figure gently extended his right hand and the countless black tentacles collapsed. Looking at this scene, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. The black tentacles were formed by the law of underworld. They possessed extreme yin and extreme coldness, as well as a strong corrosive power. They were extremely difficult to deal with. However, in front of this person, they were actually unable to withstand a single blow. To be able to do this, his strength was definitely above Xian Zhong's. Xian Zhong was a sage to be. In other words, the figure in front of him was most likely a true sage. Thinking of this, Zhuowen could not help but take another look at the figure in front of him. He was wearing a black robe and his hair was alternating between black and white. He should be around 50 or 60 years old. Zhuowen could not see through his aura at all. In other words, in Zhuowen's eyes, the elder in front of him was simply plain, as if he was just an ordinary elder. Martial Uncle Wen? Xian Zhong's eyes narrowed as he stared at the elder in astonishment. In his impression, Wen Bai was an existence that would normally not interfere in the matters of the Overlord sect. Today, he had suddenly appeared in Sky Capital Peak and seemed to be standing up for Zhuowen. Could it be that Zhuowen was very important? Xian Zhong, have you had enough? Wen Bai's voice was very cold. In that cold voice, there was a trace of irritation. Xian Zhong frowned and said, Xian Zhong does not know what martial uncle means. Humph. You don't know what I mean? Wen Bai snorted coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, the power of laws swept out, causing Xian Zhong's expression to change drastically as he retreated. Forcing an inner court disciple and even allowing the Azure Dragon envoy of the Blue Dragon Hall to run amok in the inner court. Your actions have already violated the rules of the Academy. Since this is your first offense, get the hell back to Sky Capital Peak right now. You're not allowed to take half a step out of Sky Capital Peak for half a year. Xian Zhong's expression changed drastically when he heard Wen Bai's words. Just as he was about to speak, Wen Bai spoke once more, if you don't scram, do you want me to make you scram? Xian Zhong's expression froze. He coldly stared at Shuo Wen behind Wen Bai, nodded, and planned to leave Sky Capital Peak. As for the 6th and 7th Azure Dragon emissaries, he naturally couldn't care less. However, just as he took a step forward, he suddenly raised his head and noticed a terrifying power of laws surging over from the horizon. At this moment, the 6th Azure Dragon envoy was still being ruthlessly ravaged by Xiao Yu. On the other hand, the 7th Azure Dragon envoy stood blankly to the side, not daring to interfere at all. Boom. However, Xiao Yu's ravaging didn't last for long. A terrifying power of laws swept over from above Sky Capital Peak and blasted Xiao Yu away. Xiao Yu took a few steps back and stared at the sky with narrowed eyes. He said, "Who's playing tricks? Why aren't you coming out?" As soon as Xiao Yu spoke, the power of laws surged over from above Sky Capital Peak. The power formed the shape of a translucent head. A pair of empty eyes descended onto Xiao Yu and said, "You should stop before going too far. Hall Master." Chapter 1343. Three Saints. The 6th Azure Dragon envoy crawled to his feet in a sorry state, his face swollen and bruised. He lowered his head, not daring to look at the sky. "Lord Hall Master." Wenbai and Xiao Yu both looked up at the sky and stared at the face in surprise. Wenbai said coldly, "Sapphire Shore, these two dogs were indeed sent by you. Do you really think that your Blue Dragon Hall has dominated the entire 9th Netherworld realm? You dare to do whatever you want in my divine Netherworld realm just by sending two Azure Dragon envoys?" The gigantic human face turned its head slightly, and stared at Wenbai indifferently. "Wenbai, I'm only here to ask for this descendant of the Long family. It's your divine Spectre realm's people who are being overbearing. Why are you blaming my Azure Dragon Hall? Whether he's a Rika descendant or not, he's now a disciple of our excellent Gods Institute. Your people ignored our inner courtyard and came here to ask for him. They even attacked. Are you not putting my excellent Gods Institute in your eyes?" Wenbai's voice was cold. The face frowned and said indifferently, "I didn't say that. How about this, everyone take a step back. You hand over Zhuoan, and my Blue Dragon Hall will give you a satisfactory compensation. How about it? Uncle Wenbai, the Blue Dragon Hall Master's suggestion is reasonable. We don't need to offend the Blue Dragon Hall for a disciple. The gains don't make up for the losses. Moreover, this kid's cultivation is only at the 3rd level of the Martial Emperor realm. There are plenty of people at this level in our inner courtyard. It's better to hand him over and get compensation from the Blue Dragon Hall." Xianzhong hadn't left yet. When he heard that the Blue Dragon Hall Master was here, he couldn't help but advise. "You traitorous dog, Xianzhong. You've thrown away the face of our Divine Academy. Even if Zhuoan is only at the 3rd level of the Martial Emperor realm, isn't he a disciple of our inner courtyard? Furthermore, you mean to say that as long as a disciple's cultivation is not very high, our inner courtyard can casually abandon them?" shouted Xiao Yu furiously, pointing at Xianzhong. Xianzhong's face looked even grimmer. When the other core disciples below Sky Capital Peak heard Xianzhong's words, their faces turned ugly as they discussed. They were all disciples of the Divine Grace Academy. Other than seeking higher cultivation realms and resources, they also wanted to obtain the protection of such a huge power. If the Divine Academy couldn't even protect their own disciples, it would only cause the entire Academy to be in danger. No one knew when they would offend some power and the Academy would directly hand them over to appease the other party's anger. "Martial Uncle Xianzhong, I want to ask you, if the Excellent Gods Academy doesn't have many disciples, can it still be called a big power in the 9 Netherworld realm? We joined the Academy and received the Academy's resources to increase our cultivation. Naturally, we are filled with gratitude and believe that this is our home. But if you hand over your disciples because you're afraid of offending other powers, can the inner courtyard still be your home? I think prison is more appropriate, right?" In Martial Uncle Xianzhong's eyes, "Do you think the inner courtyard is a prison? The disciples inside are prisoners under your control. You can control their fates as you wish. You can kill them or send them away as you wish." Zhuoan raised his head slightly. His gaze was extremely calm as he stared at Xianzhong. His calm and loud voice resounded. Many disciples of Sky Capital Peak were filled with righteous indignation when they heard this. After all, there were very few disciples in the inner court who could reach the high-class Emperor realm. Most of them were low or mid-class emperors. Zhuo Wen's experience inevitably made them feel sad for the loss of a rabbit. Xian Zhong's face turned green and white. Anyone would be unhappy to be lectured by a junior, let alone Xian Zhong, one of the 9 peak masters. Moreover, he couldn't refute Zhuowen's words. His actions just now were indeed biased towards the Blue Dragon Hall. If it wasn't for Xiao Yu and Wen Bai guarding Zhuowen, Xian Zhong would have already taught Zhuowen a lesson. Zhuowen is right. As one of the 9 peak masters, you can't even be compared to a junior. Have you been living like a dog all these years? Xiao Yu glanced at Zhuowen behind him with admiration. Then, he scolded Xian Zhong. Wen Bai, who was beside Xiao Yu, also glanced at Zhuowen and nodded in satisfaction. When Wen Bai and Xiao Yu rushed to the sky capital peak, they naturally saw Zhuowen using the immortal path technique. What surprised them was that Zhuowen used the void power not only to escape, but also to defend and attack. They had never thought of such a method before. Therefore, the two of them immediately made up their minds. The one who caused the void stone tablet to react was most likely Zhuowen. How could they hand over such a talent to the Blue Dragon Hall? Moreover, from Zhuowen's words just now, it was obvious that Zhuowen was a person who valued friendship and righteousness. As long as you respected him, he would respect you 10 times. Wen Bai and Xiao Yu recognized such a grateful disciple from the bottom of their hearts. Xiao Yu, watch your words. I'm just thinking for the academy. Offending the Blue Dragon Hall for a mere disciple is really a loss for the greater good. Xian Zhong snorted coldly. Oh. If I hand over your Xianming Peak's direct disciple, Xian Kai, to the Blue Dragon Hall, would you be willing? In the end, you're just a selfish guy, Xiao Yu said coldly. At this moment, the human face in the sky frowned and said coldly, Wen Bai, are you not going to hand over Zhuowen? Wen Bai raised his eyebrows and grinned. What? Sapphire Shore, are you planning to rob in the Divine Spectre realm? With just your law clone, I can deal with it in a few moves. Even if your real body comes, I can still make it so that you won't be able to return. Good, good, good. Looks like you're really going to protect this kid. Sapphire Shore frowned. Although the Divine Academy's foundation couldn't be compared to the Blue Dragon Hall, the difference wasn't that big. Even if he was the strongest saint in the 9th Netherworld realm, he didn't dare to casually barge into the Divine Spectre realm. Right now, he had only sent a law clone. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Another 3 figures flew over from the Sky Capital Peak. One of them was the Peak Master of the Sky Capital Peak, Old Man Tianju. However, at this moment, Old Man Tianju was respectfully following behind the other 2 figures, as if he was a junior. The 2 figures walking in front were very old, around 70 to 80 years old. Especially the white-robed old man at the front. His aura revealed a trace of mystery. At first glance, he seemed like an ordinary old man, but at second glance, he didn't seem ordinary at all. It was a very strange feeling. Martial Uncle Yang Ji and Martial Uncle Jiang Xian are here too? Looking at the 2 old men in front of the 3 figures, Xian Zhong was stunned and revealed a look of disbelief. These 2 old men and Wen Bai were senior figures in the entire inner yard. They were also experts who were like pillars of the inner yard. They were usually elusive, so why had they all appeared together today? Could it be that they were all here for Zhuowen? Thinking of this, Xian Zhong's gaze couldn't help but fall on Zhuowen. He frowned slightly and no one knew what he was thinking. Yang Ji, Jiang Xian, the 2 of you are also here. Good, I want one of you. I will give you enough compensation after this. I don't think this request is too much, right? Sapphire Shore's gaze fell on the white-robed old man. He knew that this old man was the dean of the entire Jioshan Academy and had the final authority to make decisions. As long as this old man agreed, Wen Bai and Xiao Yu's objections would be useless. Yang Ji and Jiang Xian came to Wen Bai's side, while old man Tianju came to Jian Mu's side and asked in a low voice. Previously, he wasn't at Tianju Peak, but was a guest at Divine Devil Peak. On the way back, he met Yang Ji and Jiang Xian. The 3 of them went to Tianju Peak together and saw this scene. Therefore, he needed to understand the situation. Yang Ji came to Wen Bai's side and the latter whispered in his ear for a while. Soon after, Yang Ji turned his head and smiled at Zhuowen. You are Zhuowen, right? You are very good. You have just joined Ao Yuan Peak, but you have already mastered the Immortal Path technique. Zhuowen naturally hurriedly returned the greeting. I was just lucky. Senior, you flatter me. You are neither arrogant nor rash. You have a good temperament. Yang Ji nodded, then turned to look at Sapphire Shore in the sky. Zhuowen, this is the Dean of the Inner Academy, Senior Uncle Yang Ji. Beside him is Jiang Xian. You should know that person just now is Wen Bai. The three of them are senior figures of the Inner Academy and are all saints. It is a little strange that all three of them have come out. Mu Chenxue was also puzzled. Even if the master of the Blue Dragon Hall had come in person, he was only a law clone. Wen Bai alone was enough. Now that all three of them had come out, it was clearly not just because of Sapphire Shore. Could the three of them have come for Zhuowen? Mu Chenxue began to guess when she remembered that Yang Ji had taken the initiative to talk to Zhuowen. Sapphire Shore's expression was a little ugly, especially when he saw that Yang Ji had ignored him and talked to Zhuowen first. He felt very unhappy, so he said coldly, Yang Ji, what do you think of my proposal? I will give you a satisfactory price as compensation. Yang Ji smiled faintly and said, the disciples of my divine academy are all priceless. We are a whole. I haven't even settled the debt with you when you came over in such a threatening manner. You actually want to bring up this matter with me? Don't you think it's funny? When these words were spoken, the disciples of the entire Sky Capital Peak burst into an uproar. The faces of many disciples were flushed red, while their eyes were filled with excitement as they stared at Yang Ji. Clearly, Yang Ji's words were very warm to them, just like a heart-strengthening drug. Oh! Yang Ji, I have already lowered my voice, and you still intend to refuse? Do you think that your divine Netherrealm is too big and can fight against my dragon Netherrealm? Sapphire Shore's eyes narrowed as he said coldly. Yang Ji was still smiling as he took a step forward. A vast aura, like the sun, spread across the entire mountain peak, the entire inner yard, and even the entire divine spectre realm. At this moment, it was as if a blazing sun had risen in the sky of the divine spectre realm. The three suns turned into four, their blazing light illuminating the land. Chapter 1344. Sapphire Shore so strong. Zhuowen's pupils shrank as he looked at Yang Ji, who had completely released his aura. The aura he had unleashed was enough to make the fourth sun rise in the divine spectre realm. What kind of power did it take to do that? Yang Ji's cultivation was definitely not just at the profound saint realm. Coupled with what Sapphire Shore had said, Zhuowen could guess that Yang Ji might have already broken through to the heavenly saint realm. Sapphire Shore, you're not the only heavenly saint in the entire 9 Netherworld realm. I, Yang Ji, am the second. If you want to fight, the divine spectre realm and I will accompany you. Yang Ji's voice was very calm, but there was a hint of fighting spirit in it. His voice spread across the sky, and countless disciples of the Sky Capital Peak became excited. Sapphire Shore's expression changed slightly as he said in a low voice, perhaps you still don't know, but this boy is not only a descendant of the Riker, but he also killed the 8th and 10th Blue Dragon envoy of the Blue Dragon Hall. The enmity between us is irreconcilable. Do you really intend to start a war between the 2 Netherworld realms for such a disciple? Zhuowen killed the 10th and 8th Blue Dragon envoy of the Blue Dragon Hall? Yang Ji was puzzled as he looked at Zhuowen behind him. This Zhuowen in front of him was only at the 3rd level Great Emperor realm. How could he kill the Blue Dragon Hall's Blue Dragon envoy with such a cultivation? Wasn't it a little unbelievable? Not only Yang Ji, but Wen Bai, Xiao Yu, Xian Zhong, Old Man Tianju, Jian Mu, and the other disciples of the Sky Capital Peak were also looking at Zhuowen with doubts, shock, and other emotions in their eyes. Mu Chenxue didn't find it strange. She knew that Zhuowen had a profound saint artifact like the Emperor's Heavenless Sword. It wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the 8th and 10th Azure Dragon envoy. However, the problem was that the energy of the Emperor's Heavenless Sword had been completely exhausted. Zhuowen, is what Sapphire Shore said right? Yang Ji asked expectantly. Zhuowen nodded and said, I did kill them. But they provoked me first. That's why I attacked them. Before speaking, Zhuo Wen naturally wanted to distance himself from the matter. He was indeed the one who killed the man, but the cause was not his fault. Yang Ji said, Yang, I can take a step back. That. Yang Ji. Studio. Of course, I can take a step back. Back then, this kid killed the 8th Azure Dragon emissary. That proves that he is very strong. Let him fight the 7th Azure Dragon emissary. If he wins, I will return immediately. If he loses, he will die. Moreover, this kid cannot use saint artifacts or other external items. He can only rely on himself, Qing Yuan suddenly suggested. Yang Ji frowned and asked Zhuowen, little guy, did you use a saint weapon to kill the 8th Blue Dragon envoy? Zhuo Wen nodded with a bitter smile. Back then, I did use a saint artifact. However, that saint artifact was damaged and could only be used twice. I have already used up those 2 chances. Yang Ji nodded and turned to Sapphire Shore, I can't agree to this. The 7th Blue Dragon envoy of your Blue Dragon Hall is an 8th Heaven Great Emperor. Zhuowen is only a 3rd Heaven Great Emperor. The difference is too big. This battle is not fair. Sapphire Shore snorted and said, he killed the 8th Blue Dragon envoy. Do you still not believe in his strength? Yang Ji still wanted to say something, but Zhuowen took a step forward and said coldly, I agree to this battle. However, if I win this battle, you have to leave. You are not allowed to enter the Divine Spectre realm again. Of course. Of course, if you lose, you have to die. This battle is still relatively fair, Sapphire Shore chuckled. His lips curled slightly. Zhuowen agreed too quickly. Yang Ji, Jiang Xian, Wen Bai and Xiao Yu did not react in time, let alone Mu Chunxue. Thank you seniors for your concern. I'm confident in this battle. Zhuowen clasped his hands at Yang Ji, Jiang Xian and the others and said gratefully. At the same time, Zhuowen also looked at Mu Chunxue, who had a bitter expression. He smiled, don't worry, I'll be fine. With that, Zhuowen suddenly leapt into the air. He looked down at the 7th Blue Dragon envoy and said indifferently, why don't you get your ass over here? The 7th Blue Dragon envoy was stunned when he heard that. Soon after, he raved with joy and laughed aloud, you reckless thing. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. With that, the 7th Blue Dragon envoy leapt into the air as well. He stared at Zhuowen coldly. Tianji Yu had already told them how the 8th Blue Dragon envoy had died. He had been killed by this person's saint artifact. Under the premise that he could not use his saint artifact, he was completely confident that he could kill Jian Chen in a few moves. After all, the difference between the two of them was extremely great. Arrogant brat, you're basically looking to die. Nearby, Xian Zhong crossed his arms over his chest and sneered. All of the Sky Capital Peak Core disciples were stunned when they saw this scene. Zhuo Wen was naturally no stranger to them. Many of the Sky Capital Peak disciples had seen him tugging and pulling Mu Chunxue's hand earlier. Many disciples of the Sky Capital Peak had a strange expression on their faces when they saw Yang Ji taking the initiative to challenge the 7th Azure Dragon envoy. Some of them even shook their heads, thinking that Yang Ji was too foolish. Yang Ji was clearly protecting him, yet he still wanted to seek death. Senior Yang Ji, what should we do? Xiao Yu and I are certain that the strange movement of the spatial stone tablet might have been caused by this person. This is because he used the Immortal Path technique when he was pursued by Xian Zhong. He also used the spatial force to defend and attack with ease, when Bai whispered to Yang Ji. Yang Ji's eyes flickered. He sighed, since Zhuowen has come out of his own accord, we can only rely on him. However, this kid is not simple. I think he must have some sort of trump card. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to fight the 7th Blue Dragon envoy. I hope so. Wenbai nodded and did not say anything else. Zhuowen had already agreed to fight the 7th Blue Dragon envoy. Since they wanted to protect him, it wasn't appropriate for them to interfere. They could only wait and see. Just as everyone's attention was fixed on the battle between Zhuowen and the 7th Blue Dragon envoy, A figure walked out of a pavilion not far away from Sky Capital Peak. This person was tall and slender. His clothes were messy and his fair face was filled with laziness. His eyes were drowsy as if he had not yet woken up. This person yawned. He also noticed Zhuowen and the 7th Blue Dragon Envoy, who were facing each other in the distance. He even saw Old Man Tianju, Yang Ji, Jiang Xian and other upper echelons of the inner courtyard. However, this person was not too surprised. He yawned again and casually leaned against a wooden pillar. He muttered, "What's going on today? Sky Capital Peak is so lively. Even Yang Ji, Jiang Xian and Wenbai are here. Xian Zhong, Xiao Yu and Old Man Tianju are here too. What's going on? And is that the Hall Master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shaw? He only sent a law clone over. How cowardly." With that, this person yawned again and looked at Zhuowen. He said, "I've never seen this guy before. He's a new disciple, right? A 3rd-level Great Emperor against an 8th-level Great Emperor. He's a real man indeed. He's like me back then. Let's see how badly this kid will be beaten." The 7th Blue Dragon Envoy looked at Zhuowen and said indifferently, "You're lucky to have used a saint weapon to kill the 8th Blue Dragon Envoy. However, without a saint weapon, what will you use to fight me? It's better for you to accept your death obediently." With that, the 7th Blue Dragon Envoy stepped out of the void and reached for his waist with his right hand. With a swoosh, he pulled out a shiny saber. He rushed in front of Zhuowen and slashed. Saber light and sword shadows crushed down from the sky. The rumbling sound was extremely terrifying. Zhuowen's expression did not change. He stretched out his right hand and the tiger head deep golden spear was thrown out. The whistling wind turned into a huge tiger head. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws, fiercely smashing against the incoming saber. Clang! The sound of metal clashing resounded through the sky. Wisps of sparks burst out from the tip of the spear and the saber. Then, the two separated. Zhuowen took dozens of steps back while the 7th Blue Dragon Envoy only took a few steps back. It was obvious that the 7th Blue Dragon Envoy had the upper hand in this exchange. "Old 7, don't hold back. Finish him off cleanly." Sapphire Shaw was clearly not satisfied with the current outcome. He transmitted his voice to the 7th Blue Dragon Envoy. The 7th Blue Dragon Envoy nodded. Immediately, a ray of light burst out from between his eyebrows. A fierce roar swept out from the light. Then, a huge beast floated in the sky. The beast had a dragon head, a horse body, and scales feet. It looked like a lion with grayish-white fur. When it opened its mouth, its tongue was purplish-black. There were rows of barbs on its surface. It looked extremely ferocious and terrifying. "My armor soul is Pai Xiu. Release your armor soul too. Otherwise, you won't have a chance," the 7th Blue Dragon Envoy said indifferently. Zhuowen ignored the 7th Blue Dragon Envoy. Instead, he transmitted his voice to Cheng Huang in his Sea of Consciousness. "Little Huang, can you really use the 8th Blue Dragon Envoy's Yuaning to release a sure-kill attack?" Cheng Huang patted its chest and said, "Don't worry. The Fushi Cauldron also has an offensive formation. However, it needs a powerful energy to activate it. Since you don't want to expose the existence of the Black Dog, use the Fushi Cauldron. This cauldron has disappeared for tens of thousands of years. No one can recognize it. Moreover, the appearance of the cauldron has changed greatly over time. Although many of the formations are broken, I can still maintain some useful formations with me around." Zhuowen nodded when he heard this. Immediately, he pointed his right hand at his forehead and summoned the ordinary-looking Fushi Cauldron. "Hey, where's your dragon soul? Is this broken cauldron also your armor soul?" The 7th Blue Dragon Envoy was stunned and asked in surprise. "I don't need a dragon soul to deal with you," Zhuowen said irritatingly. "You're courting death." The 7th Blue Dragon Envoy flew into a rage. He roared and rushed toward Zhuowen with his armor soul, Pai Xiu. The Pai Xiu's purplish-black tongue was like a vine. It cut through the void, wanting to sweep up and devour Zhuowen. 8th Blue Dragon Envoy, I'll have to trouble your Yuaniying. Chapter 1345. The Law of Lightning. Zhuowen, you bastard, what are you doing? The 8th Azure Dragon Envoy's Yuanying cursed at Zhuowen as soon as it appeared. His face was filled with agitation, but before he could finish, Zhuowen stuffed him into the Fushi cauldron. Inside the Fushi cauldron, the 8th Azure Dragon Envoy screamed, but he soon lost his breath. Oh, that's old 8th's Yuanying. He was indeed the one who killed him. Standing on the head of the Pai Xiu, the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy saw the Yuanying that Zhuowen had thrown into the Fushi cauldron. With a cold snort, the Pai Xiu beneath him increased its speed and arrived above Zhuowen's head in an instant. Its huge body was like a dark cloud. Swoosh! The purple tongue wrapped around Zhuowen in a spiral shape. The purple barbs on the surface of the tongue emitted a chilling light, accompanied by a strange purple aura. Zhuowen held the tiger head clear golden spear in his hand. At the same time, the dragon seal in his palm was ready to attack. He was secretly on guard. The armor spirit of the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy was not simple, so he naturally had to be cautious. But at the instant the violet tongue had just arrived before Zhuowen, an extremely terrifying and enormous hand suddenly flashed out from within the Fushi cauldron. This enormous hand was over 3 kilometers in size and seemed lofty like a mountain. On the surface of the giant hand, the massive dragon horse and the divine turtle rotated around the giant hand in a spiral posture. A vast pressure spread out, causing the entire space to resound with crackling sounds. What is this thing? The 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's pupils shrank. He did not expect such a giant hand to extend out from the Fushi cauldron. Caught off guard, the Pai Xiu under his feet crashed into it. This giant hand was even larger than the Pai Xiu. The dark cloud-like palm pinched the Pai Xiu like a little chick. Then, it exerted force, causing the Pai Xiu to cry out to the sky. Its huge body collapsed under the force of the giant hand. No, how is this possible? The 7th Azure Dragon Emissary was in disbelief. He stomped his foot and quickly retreated. However, the giant hand was extremely fast. It whizzed over and smashed toward the 7th Azure Dragon Emissary. A strange cracking sound could be heard. Wherever the giant hand passed, the space would shatter like glass. Fart! A jade talisman suddenly appeared in the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's hand and he crushed it. His speed suddenly increased and he just happened to escape the range of the giant beast's attack. However, the terrifying wind created by the giant hand still covered the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's body, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood and his face to turn pale. At the same time, the enormous hand seemed to be lacking in strength, and it swiftly withdrew back into the Fushi cauldron. However, at that moment, Zhuowen made his move. His right hand streaked across the air, and he disappeared into the void. When he reappeared, he was still behind the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy. Then, Zhuowen struck out with his right hand, and the dragon seal in his palm emitted a blazing pitch-black light. Heavenly Dragon! Clang! Numerous thick, black chains shot out from Zhuowen's palms, locking the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy within them from all directions. Damn it! What kind of chains are these? The 7th Azure Dragon Envoy did not notice Zhuowen, who had disappeared into the void. His attention was on the giant hand. When Zhuowen released the Heavenly Dragon Seal, the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy came back to his senses. However, it was too late. He wanted to use brute force to break the chains on his body. However, he realized that the chains were extremely tough. He struggled with all his might, but he could not break them. Moreover, he also discovered that there were small streams of black dragon aura swimming around the chains, maintaining the toughness of the chains. Although he could use his strength to destroy a portion of the chains, the dragon aura could quickly gather together to repair the broken parts of the chains. It's over. Zhuowen held the tiger head clear golden spear in his right hand and suddenly thrust it out. The golden spear tip spun at high speed and instantly pierced the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's heart. Poochie! The spear pierced through the 7th Azure Dragon Envoy's body, bringing with it a mist of blood. The 7th Azure Dragon Envoy stared at Zhuowen and spat out a mouthful of blood. He died with his eyes wide open. Zhuoan pulled out the tiger head clear golden spear indifferently and pressed his right hand on the seventh azure dragon envoy's dantian. A suction force swept out from his palm and the seventh azure dragon envoy's yuanying was controlled by Zhuoan. Although the seventh azure dragon envoy was also an 8th level emperor, he was stronger than the 8th azure dragon envoy. The energy contained in his yuanying was also much richer. At the same time, Zhuowen's memory of the hand that had extended from the Fushi cauldron was still fresh in his mind. If he had guessed correctly, Cheng Huang had used the power of the 8th azure dragon envoy's nascent soul to launch an attack. However, he did not know what it was called. Looks like I have to ask Cheng Huang when I return. There are still many unknown things in the Fushi cauldron, Zhuowen muttered to himself. At this moment, the entire sky capital peak became very quiet. Everyone stared blankly at the young man who was holding the 7th azure dragon envoy's yuanying in his hand. A 3rd level emperor against an 8th level emperor. Everyone was stunned by the outcome of the battle. Of course, more people were curious about the strange jade cauldron that Zhuowen had summoned. The giant hand that reached out from it had left a deep impression on everyone. The 7th azure dragon envoy's armor soul, Pai Xiu, was unable to resist the giant hand and was crushed into powder. It was a little too terrifying. This jade cauldron should be his armor soul. However, didn't Sapphire Shaw say that he's a Rika descendant? Shouldn't he have a dragon soul? Xiao Yu licked his lips and said in surprise. Of course, Xiao Yu's voice was mixed with excitement. One must know that Zhuowen was his direct disciple. Killing the 7th azure dragon envoy in front of everyone was undoubtedly enough to win him face. Moreover, Zhuowen was very likely to be the guy who had caused the void stone tablet to act strangely. The more Xiao Yu looked at Zhuowen, the more he liked him. This time, he has at least 2 armor souls. This jade cauldron is one of them, and the other should be the Rika dragon soul. This kid is a talent. Yang Ji, Wen Bai, and Jiang Xian looked at each other and saw a hint of surprise in each other's eyes. Although Zhuowen's cultivation wasn't strong now, the talent he had displayed had surprised the 3 of them. In the future, this kid's achievements might be able to catch up to the number 1 direct disciple of Sky Capital Peak, Yang Yi. Hey! This kid's armor soul isn't bad. It can actually unleash such a powerful force. The power of the giant hand just now was comparable to a 9th level emperor's full strength attack. With a flip of the hand, it annihilated the 7th azure dragon envoy. Not far away, the young man who was originally leaning on the wooden pillar yawned again. His lazy expression turned serious. It seemed that Zhuowen wasn't simple. What a ruthless kid. How dare he kill the 7th azure dragon envoy? His courting death. When the crowd fell silent, a furious roar suddenly rang out. Soon after, the crowd saw the 6th azure dragon envoy, whose face was swollen with bruises, like a mad dog. His 9th level emperor aura crushed down and he instantly swept in front of Zhuowen. Bastard, how dare you go back on your words? Xiao Yu cursed and took a step forward, wanting to stop the 6th azure dragon envoy. Bang! However, before Xiao Yu could take a step forward, he was blocked by an invisible, transparent barrier in front of him. It was a barrier formed by the power of laws. Sapphire Shaw, you old bastard, how dare you stop me? Xiao Yu looked up at the face in the sky and roared angrily. Mate, this kid is ruthless. He actually killed the 7th azure dragon envoy in front of me. He simply doesn't put me in his eyes. What's wrong with letting the 6th azure dragon envoy teach this kid a lesson? Sapphire Shaw said indifferently. Sapphire Shaw, you've gone too far. Yang Ji's expression was ugly. He swept in front of Xiao Yu and slammed his skinny palm into the barrier. Then, the barrier collapsed. Yang Ji was originally at the peak of the profound sage realm. Because he had broken through and become a heavenly sage, although there was a gap between him and the Hall Master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Sapphire Shaw, the gap wasn't too big. In addition, Sapphire Shaw was only a law clone at this moment. The barrier created by him couldn't stop Yang Ji, who was already a heavenly sage. There's more. Bastard, Sapphire Shaw, did you set this up long ago? The moment the barrier was broken, Yang Ji wanted to go to Zhuowen's side and stop the sixth Azure Dragon envoy. However, just as he took a step forward, he encountered another barrier. This barrier contained an extremely powerful power of thunder. The law of thunder was a Saint Rune law that Sapphire Shaw had comprehended himself. Its power was very terrifying. Even if this was only a barrier created by a law clone, it would take Yang Ji at least a breath to break it. However, the problem now was that the sixth Azure Dragon envoy was already in front of Zhuowen. Yang Ji couldn't afford to waste a single breath. Die. The sixth Azure Dragon envoy had a cold smile on his face. His body was covered with green scales. His hands turned into two dragon claws and smashed down. His target was Zhuowen's head. Zhuowen calmly picked up the seventh Azure Dragon emissary's nascent soul and stuffed it into the Fushi cauldron. Instantly, the giant hand that appeared just now burst out from the cauldron again. With the dragon horse and the godly turtle circling around it, the giant hand's power was terrifying. However, the smile on the sixth Azure Dragon emissary's face grew even wider. Terrifying lightning suddenly covered his dragon claws. The lightning contained strands of law energy. It was the law of lightning. Boom! A terrifying explosion sounded. Then, the entire sky was covered by endless lightning. The giant hand collapsed into nothingness. The sixth Azure Dragon envoy was already in front of Zhuowen. How is this possible? You have the power of law on you. Zhuowen didn't even have time to react. The giant hand collapsed and the sixth Azure Dragon envoy was already in front of him. He couldn't help but mumble to himself as if he was sleep-talking. The law of thunder was given to me by the palace master. Therefore, you deserve to die. Chapter 1346. A Battle of Saint Sapphire Shaw, You Despicable Bastard. Yang Ji naturally noticed the law of lightning on the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's claw. It was a true Saint Rune law. Anyone below the Saint realm would not be able to withstand it. There was no doubt that Zhuowen would die under this attack. It was not just Yang Ji. Xiao Yu, Jiang Xian, Wen Bai, Mu Chunxue, and even the countless core disciples of Sky Capital Peak changed their expressions. No one had expected Sapphire Shaw to have such a hidden card. The law of lightning was probably something that Sapphire Shaw had secretly given to the sixth Azure Dragon envoy. It was just that no one had noticed. However, it was too late for anyone to help because the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's attack was already very close. In the next moment, the dragon claw covered in the law of lightning was about to land on Zhuowen's body. The latter would definitely die. Zhuowen's pupils shrank to the size of needles. Lightning seemed to fill his entire gaze as the feeling of death approached. Zhuowen's heart was filled with despair. No, I can't die. Zhuowen roared furiously as a mysterious power surged out from his body, forming a ring-shaped barrier around him. At the same time, the mysterious power grew more and more vigorous. It actually soared into the sky from his head as an extremely mysterious power of law descended from the sky. It was the law of heaven and earth, a power that surpassed the Saint Rune law. Boom! The smile on the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's face reached its limit. Then, it froze. He realized that when his dragon claw, which was covered with the law of lightning, was 1 foot away from Zhuowen, it completely froze. It could not move forward at all. What's going on? As soon as he spoke, the sixth Azure Dragon envoy was stunned to discover a terrifying power surging from Zhuowen. The power was like water pressure as it heavily acted on his dragon claw, directly dispersing the law of lightning on his dragon claw. As for the sixth Azure Dragon emissary, he was forced to retreat again and again. His expression was uncertain as he stared at Zhuowen, who was floating in the air and surrounded by mysterious energy. That's mystic comprehending state? This kid actually entered the mystic comprehending realm at the moment of life and death. Looks like he's not fated to die yet. Yang Ji laughed heartily. His originally gloomy mood immediately became much more cheerful. He threw a palm strike, shattering the barrier formed by the laws of lightning in front of him. Afterwards, he took a step towards the human face formed by Qing Yuan in the sky. Sapphire Shaw, since you are so heartless, then don't blame me for being unjust. I originally planned on letting this nomological avatar of yours leave, but from the looks of it now, that idea is truly laughable." Yang Ji's loud and clear voice resounded across the sky. Immediately, the face of the person in the sky became extremely ugly. With a sharp howl, he planned to escape into the void and flee. "You can't escape. I've grasped the laws of light, so I can see where there's light. You can't escape my detection." With that, an extremely blazing light erupted from Yang Ji's body. The light soared into the sky and spread in all directions at an astonishing speed. The entire divine nether realm was enveloped by the blazing light. After releasing the light, Yang Ji snorted coldly. He stepped out of the void and extended his right hand. Endless light gathered to form a giant hand of light that was several hundred feet tall. The hand of light squeezed gently and the surrounding space immediately collapsed. Boom! A frightening thunderbolt shot out from the collapsed space. Soon after, a figure in green robes, whose body was covered in thunderbolts, shot out from the void. His expression was extremely ugly as he stared at Yang Ji. "Yang Ji, don't go too far. If you dare to destroy this law clone of mine, it means that our two underworld realms have completely fallen out with each other." "At that time, I don't know what I will do," Yang Ji said coldly. The figure was a man wearing a green mask. His hoarse voice was filled with a special magnetism. "Go too far. Sapphire Shore, who's the one that's going too far? You sent 2 blue dragon envoys to aggressively come to my inner yard to ask for Zhuo Wen, and even made a solemn vow to set up a wager. However, Zhuo Wen won in the end, and you actually went back on your word. You despicable and shameless fellow, you actually said that I was going too far. If I, Yang Ji, allow this nomological avatar of yours to leave the divine netherrealm today, I'll change my surname to yours." With that, Yang Ji took a step forward. His body erupted with intense light. Afterwards, 4 huge suns descended from the horizon of the divine netherrealm and revolved above Yang Ji's head. Each sun was even larger than the mountain range in the inner academy. Sapphire Shore's eyes flickered. He knew that Yang Ji was determined to destroy his avatar, so he did not hold back. The laws of lightning circled around his body and terrifying lightning formed a lightning armor on the surface of his body. At the same time, the lightning on Sapphire Shore's body became more and more terrifying. In the end, it was like a black cloud that filled the entire sky, forming a boundless sea of lightning. "If that's the case, then let's fight." Sapphire Shore coldly snorted and took a step forward. Every step he took emitted terrifying lightning liquid. As he walked, the vast sea of lightning swirled around him. At this moment, it was as if Sapphire Shore had become the king of this sea of lightning. All of the lightning energy was under his control. Fight! Yang Ji did not waste any time. The 4 huge suns above his head were controlled by his laws of light as if they were his arms. Boom! 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 The 4 blazing suns and the vast sea of lightning collided in the sky above the divine netherrealm. Following that, an earth-shattering explosion resounded. Blazing sunlight and frightening lightning filled the entire sky. At this moment, only the blazing suns and lightning remained in the sky. Everyone's eyes were filled with the blazing suns and lightning. The terrifying power transmitted from the collision spread throughout the entire divine netherrealm. It was like an earthquake, causing many people in the divine netherrealm to stagger, their faces filled with shock. Between the sea of lightning and the blazing suns, 2 figures were constantly crisscrossing. Every time they collided, it would cause a tsunami-like tremor. The suns in the sky are moving. The sea of lightning is wreaking havoc. 2 figures are fighting. Those are saints. In the divine netherrealm, countless cultivators raised their heads. They looked at the terrifying scene in the sky in shock. Some weaker cultivators even trembled and hid far away. However, the shockwaves from this battle between saints spread throughout the entire divine netherrealm. There was nowhere to hide. Everyone could only raise their heads to watch this unprecedented battle and try their best to avoid the shockwaves from the battle between the 2 sides. Even the aftermath of a battle between saints was not something that ordinary cultivators could withstand. In the inner courtyard, Jiang Xian and Wenbai leapt into the air. The two of them displayed their respective laws, forming a thick barrier of laws in the sky above the inner courtyard. The battle between Sapphire Shore and Yang Ji was too terrifying. If no defensive measures were taken, the inner courtyard, which was closest to the battle, would suffer. Sure enough, the instant Jiang Xian and Wen Bai set up their defenses, Yang Ji and Sapphire Shore arrived above the inner courtyard. The earth-shattering aftermath spread out. The entire inner courtyard began to shake violently under the aftermath, causing many disciples to panic. Fortunately, the defenses set up by Jiang Xian and Wen Bai were able to block the terrifying aftermath. Otherwise, the aftermath of the battle between the two saints would be enough to cause the inner courtyard to suffer heavy losses. At the same time, the sixth Azure Dragon envoy, whose attack had missed, paled. He wanted to escape, but was caught by Xiao Yu. "Where do you think you're going? You sure have some tricks up your sleeve." If Zhuoan hadn't reached the profound understanding realm, he probably would have been killed by your schemes. "Die." Xiao Yu snorted coldly. He slammed his right hand towards the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's head. The laws of fire surged out. Even though the sixth Azure Dragon envoy used his defensive measures, they were like tofu before Xiao Yu's laws of fire. They could not withstand a single blow and collapsed instantly. Under the might of the flames, he was reduced to ashes. Xiao Yu's laws of fire were very domineering. Not only was the sixth Azure Dragon envoy's body destroyed, but even his nascent soul was unable to escape. They were all reduced to ashes. Nearby, Xianzhong opened his mouth when he saw this, but he did not say anything in the end. Although the sixth Azure Dragon envoy had saved his life in the past, he could not even protect himself now. He obviously would not meddle in other people's business and cause more trouble for himself. After killing the sixth Azure Dragon envoy, Xiao Yu raised his head to look at Yang Ji and Sapphire Shore, who were still fighting in the sky. It was not just Xiao Yu. Everyone in the inner courtyard and even the divine spectre domain was paying attention to the great battle in the sky. A battle between saints was very rare. It was rare to see one even once in 1,000 years. "Yang Ji, you're vicious. Do you really plan on destroying this law clone of mine?" An exasperated voice rang out mightily from the sky. Immediately, the terrifying sea of lightning was completely suppressed by the 4 blazing suns. Furthermore, it became more and more compressed. In the end, the sea of lightning was destroyed and Sapphire Shore's voice vanished into the horizon. The blazing light gradually receded, revealing Yang Ji's slender figure. At that moment, Yang Ji was like a god of war. The 4 blazing suns above his head illuminated him with endless light, making him seem like a god that had descended to the mortal world. Everyone stared at the majestic figure as reverence filled their eyes. Everyone recognized the figure. He was the strongest saint of the divine spectre domain, the dean of the inner courtyard, Yang Ji. The 3 sons of the divine spectre domain were created by Yang Ji, who grasped the laws of light. He brought light and heat to the divine spectre domain. Yang Ji waved his right hand and 3 of the blazing suns flew out, hanging in the sky of the divine spectre domain once again. The 4th sun entered Yang Ji's body. As the light receded, Yang Ji was still the ordinary white-robed old man. He slowly took a step forward and landed on Sky Capital Peak. "Senior brother, has Sapphire Shore's law clone been dealt with?" Wen Bai asked anxiously the moment Yang Ji landed. Yang Ji nodded and smiled faintly. "It's been dealt with. However, Sapphire Shore is probably exasperated right now. Condensing a law clone requires a lot of effort." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,